5, but and Mayor, at 5 o'clock, if you'd like to get started.
Gotcha. I'd like to call this May 24th meeting of the City Council of Charleston to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Gregg.
Here.
Councilmember Shealy.
Here.
Councilmember Saccharin. Councilmember Mitchell. Councilmember Brady. Councilmember Gregory. Councilmember Waring. Councilmember Seekings. Councilmember Shade. Councilmember Bowden. Councilmember Appel. Councilmember Parker. Mayor Tecklenburg.
Here. And now if y'all would like to join us, Councilmember Gregg is going to lead us in an invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Lord, we thank you for the blessing it is to live in this city of Charleston and be in this community. We pray for grace and humility as we work with each other and work with those in this community. Help us to love and serve the citizens of this city well. We thank you for the blessing you provide us today. In your name I pray, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Great. Thank you very much, Council Member. So I'd also like to thank all my well-wishers who have sent me get well wishes. My symptoms with COVID have been very mild, and as a fact, today I'm feeling great. I would be there with you other than they say I should stay away from folks for a few days. So I'll be back in just a couple of days. So without objection, even though I can see y'all and hear somewhat well, without objection, I would like to ask Mayor Pro Tem Brady to lead us conduct the meeting this evening. We have 12 public hearings, and I think just being there in person and seeing and hearing everything in person probably runs the meeting a little more effectively. Any objection to that? Hearing none, take it away, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor Tecklenburg.
Y'all are looking pretty good, by the way. On
Thank you. I'd like to remind everyone in attendance, in the unlikely event of an emergency, you're going to exit out of these two doors and proceed down the stairs and out of the building. Please do not use the elevator in the event of an emergency. So with that, I would like to move on to proclamation or presentations and recognitions. And we have a proclamation recognizing Alyssa Weselek, who is with the University of South Carolina Women's Gamecocks NCAA National Champions. And you can feel free to come up with your guests and stand behind me, and I will read the proclamation on behalf of Mayor Tecklenburg. And if any Gamecock faithful from City Council want to come up too. All right, come on up. All right. Yeah, I was going to say crowded field today. All right, a proclamation. Whereas the City of Charleston is proud to recognize Alyssa Weselek, native Charlestonian and member 2022 NCAA Women's Basketball National Championship team at the University of South Carolina. And whereas at the age of 4, Alyssa Weselek began playing basketball in church and recreation leagues throughout the Charleston area. She attended Ashley River Creative Arts and as an 8th grader, played varsity basketball for West Ashley High School while attending St. Andrews Middle School. And whereas she graduated from Northwood Academy High School, she was named the South Carolina Statewide Player of the Year in 2017 and Miss Basketball in 2018 by the High School Sports Report of the South Carolina Independent School Association. She was named the Girls Basketball Player of the Year in 2018 by Prep Sports and led Northwood Academy to 3 straight South Carolina Independent School Association state championships in 2015, 2016, and 2017. Wow. And whereas she was the top high school basketball recruit in the state, had numerous Division I college scholarship offers, and chose to play at the University of South Carolina in 2018. And whereas she played as a forward for the Gamecocks in the Southeastern Conference and received Southeastern Conference Academic Honor Roll all 4 years of her collegiate career. Very impressive. And whereas she and the Lady Gamecocks were declared the #1 undisputed champions in 2020, but COVID shut down postseason play and they were not able to compete for the much anticipated NCAA tournament title. They made back-to-back Final Four appearances in 2021 and 2022. And on April 3rd, 2022, with a decisive 64-49 win over UConn, clinched the NCAA tournament championship. And whereas Alyssa Westlake received the key to the city of Columbia at the state capitol building on April 13th, and we are proud to welcome her today in her hometown to recognize her hard work on and off the basketball courts, which ultimately earned her the impressive title of NCAA champion. And now, therefore, not me, but on behalf of John J. Tecklenburg, Mayor of the City of Charleston, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, May 24th, 2022 as Alyssa Westlake Day in the City of Charleston.
Well, I'll keep it short and simple, but I'm grateful for this honor and be recognized here in my home state and home county. But just want to say thank you. Go Cox.
Would anyone else like to speak? All right. Well, thank you.
Congratulations, Alyssa.
All right, well, everyone takes their seats. We will move on to public hearings tonight. We do have 12 public hearings to get through tonight, so I would like to set the time limit at 60 seconds for those wishing to be heard on the public hearing matters, just given the sheer number that we have. And I'll move on to item 1 and have legal present.
Thank you very much. So this is a public hearing regarding a request to abandon a portion of 3rd Avenue. The applicant, Ann Casey, is here tonight. She flew in from Colorado. I will share with you the thoughts and the reasons why she's asking for this. But let me just start by saying that Ann Casey is a Charleston native. This property has been in her family since 1979, and her plan is to move back here from Colorado and build a home on this property. Based on her request from November 12th of 2021, and you should have an aerial in your packet showing the property if you want to refer to that. And there may actually be something online. Is there anything online, Jennifer, for the screen or no?
No, we did not receive any slides.
Just making sure. Okay, so according to the applicant, the request is being made because within that area, and she's calling it a sliver. It's a triangle of 3rd Avenue. It's a piece, it's 2,658 square feet. Most of it is in an embankment into the marsh. It's not highland. But sitting on that triangle is a grand oak tree. It has been damaged pretty significantly by storms, and a piece of it is actually hanging in the direction of where the house is going to be built. So one of the requests is if she gets this piece of 3rd Avenue, she will be responsible for the tree and its maintenance as opposed to the city. We abandoned 8th Avenue several years ago and split it between the 2 adjacent owners. Ms. Casey is one of those owners. So now that she has 8th Avenue, the second reason is that portion of 3rd Avenue is now landlocked. If anyone wanted to access that piece, they would have to go through her private property. Reason number three, if you're looking at the property and facing the water, a portion on the right has been eaten away by time and the tide. And the request is being made because as a counterbalance to receive that 2,658 square foot piece. It would counterbalance the loss for the right side of the property. Also, she's claiming that to have this 2,658 square foot piece, it's necessary to be able to satisfy the minimum setback requirements should she build a house on this piece of property. So with that said, I do believe Tom O'Brien is on, as well as, and Jason Kronsberg is here as well from Public Services and Parks, and they probably want to have some words as well. Thank you.
You can speak during public comment, but this is not the public comment period yet. I'm just asking citizens get to cast their opinion, or is it on display? There is a public comment portion coming during this portion of the public hearing, which we will get to after staff presents to City Council. Is Tom or anyone else from staff presenting?
Can you hear me, sir?
I can.
Okay, hey, this is Tom O'Brien, Director of Public Service. When we received this request, we did as we normally did, and we sent out requests for comment from city department heads and also utility companies, which is our standard procedure when we receive these requests. The comments we received back were not in favor of granting this closing and abandonment for a couple reasons. With sea level rise and other things, which we do not know what will happen in the future, along with the potential for, as I think Jason will speak to in a few minutes, potential of parkland for a linear type park. We just feel that just abandoning city property at this time is not a good idea. And for those reasons, we do not wish to recommend for approval of this request.
We will. Okay. Does anyone else from city staff wish to present on this? Mr. Kronsberg? And for Coach Staley, just hang with us. We'll get to it in a second. I'm sorry.
Thank you. So waterfront property in the city of Charleston is very precious, right? The way this edge of land extends off of 3rd Avenue, it is quite a bit of highland if you look at it. There's some nice trees which may not be in the best condition, but in the future with sea level rise, the potential for using this land to protect against that sea level rise, the potential for using this land as a linear park along the edge, potentially bridging over to the Longborough neighborhood. We just have to think of things in the 100-year time span. You know, are we going to do anything with it right now? No, but it's in the public domain. And we just need to be very careful on what we do with that land and not be too short-sighted by simply giving it away.
Now, if it's okay, I'd like to ask the leave of council, since we have Coach Staley on and we just did our proclamation. I'd like to give Coach Staley the chance to congratulate Alyssa, if that's okay with the rest of council. All right, take it away, Coach.
Oh, I would just like to thank Alyssa and the Westlicks for just sharing their time and their daughter with our program. Obviously, during Alyssa's time with our program, we've experienced some historical wins, and it's attributed to Alyssa's sacrifice and her ability to share what being a great teammate, what, you know, how she grew up, and it comes by way of the city of Charleston. So I am not surprised by her receiving this recognition, and the entire family for the success right now, and also the success of the future that she will bring, and continue to make the city of Charleston proud.
Well, thank you, Coach. We greatly appreciate it. You have a great rest of the day and go Cox. All right, I'd like to resume the public hearing for item 1. As I stated at the beginning, we have 12 public hearings. So we'll cap time at 60 seconds for those wishing to speak. Is there anyone signed up for this matter, Madam Clerk?
Anthony Bryant.
I'm here for my individual liberties, not for civil rights. Without prohibition, with prohibition in this country as a Black man, in terms of this property, that deny access to Black people, because in that neighborhood years ago, I used to play in that neighborhood, but nobody Black playing it in now. And so the racism in zoning policies in this city is pervasive. And so I think now that since we know how you really feel about Black people, you really feel this way through your zoning policy. And I think that this policy is reflective of how you vote. Now, the quality of your mission statement talks about public safety, physical space, and you have to let the public know on the 3rd reading is the effective date. And you have a right to judicial review against any policy you put forward. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and be heard on this matter?
Mohammed Idris, evening mayor pro tem and city council. I don't see how y'all can say that the land is not right to build on when y'all are taking and putting our museum on contaminated land. The staff of this city is like a bunch of snakes. And I'm saying that like it's deceiving us. Why wouldn't you want the person to build on that land when we are putting a multi-million-dollar African-American museum on land that y'all had said was contaminated and moved the people off the land, and then going to put our museum on contaminated land? Y'all some strange people.
Thank you, sir. Yes, please come forward.
My grandfather, Melvin Lesser, won a state Supreme Court case in 1995 for repairing rights to navigable water against all the masters of equity courts, and it was overturned with the state Supreme Court. Coburg contended that they had like a writ from the King of England that didn't require them to pay taxes, but you might want to jot that down. That's all I want to say about that. My ancestor, Melvin Jules Lesser's Jules on King Street, that liberated Buchenwald, Dachau Holocaust survivor, and brought my father here.
Would you mind speaking into the mic?
Yeah, Lesser versus Coburg, 1995. Judge Condon, they all basically, there was like the low tide, Howard Yates helped, and there was like a bluff of land above water. And so everyone had a dock on Chadwick Drive, and Melvin tried to like build it down from South Windermere. And then like they said no, and Melvin was like, well, that's no good. And then eventually he found that little bluff. Well, Coburg contended and Judge Condon that it couldn't be done because they didn't have to pay taxes, and so it was theirs because it was in the line of sight.
Time.
Coburg versus Lesser.
Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter? Yes, please come forward. If you could state your name and address for the record, that'd be great.
Hi, Ann Casey, number 68th Avenue. This is my request. And I'm just grateful, first of all, for you all hearing this. It's a continued unfinished business, in my opinion. It's 1985. The city council quitclaimed portion of 8th Avenue to meet to both properties. In 2015, they continued and finished it. So my request is really not the 3rd Avenue being quitclaimed to me. It's the continuation of 8th Avenue that was done in 1985 and in 2015. The sliver of property that I'm referring to, the amount of high ground of the 2,658 square feet is probably 600 feet of it. And then the rest of it's an absolute embankment down to a marsh. So there's no building of anything on it. The only intention that I have of the request is that the city maintain the
Time.
trees on the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to be heard on this matter? All right, if not, the matter comes to council. Councilmember Gregory, then Shealy.
Just to. Can we determine where we've done this before in that area? Have we, haven't we? Okay.
Please come to the mic.
Yes, sir. In fact, adjacent to this particular property is 8th Avenue, and that was abandoned in 2018, I believe, all the way to the end. It actually stops at 3rd, and it was quitclaimed to either adjacent property owner. I think there were some other roads as well. There was a memo I sent out to you guys earlier today that talks about this consideration. I think it was in 85 or several paper streets were abandoned. I do believe 3rd was specifically cut from that decision because there are portions of it that are on the marsh, and there was consideration of using it as a linear park at some point in the future, which I think is what Mr. Kronsberg spoke to.
Just for clarity, can Jason come up again? Jason, you wasn't clear on your recommendation.
Councilmember, can you lower your mic?
Yeah, I wasn't clear on your recommendation.
So so 8th, by the way, I didn't vote for that one either.
Okay.
Because that really interrupted the connectivity there. But if, at the end of 3rd Avenue, at the rear of all those property lines, is high land. It's got, a portion of it has some nice trees. And again, in 100 years or so, whatever the case may be, it could be a small waterfront park for that neighborhood. So as the Parks Director, that's my recommendation. And then when it comes to land of public domain, we had the similar scenario down near Hazel Parker Playground. It wasn't a right of way, but it was city land. We had it appraised, and we appraised per square foot because it was a sliver of land, the property owner needed it, and they've had to purchase that land from us. So.
The reason why I raise those questions because the parcel is in my district. And while I've not heard any opposition necessarily from the neighborhood, I'm still a bit concerned to take something out of the public realm and sort of complete sort of the taking that occurred many, many years ago. I know that we talked about it, so it's not new to me, but I'm a little concerned.
All right, we have Councilmember Shealy, Gregg, Seekings, then Saccharin.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to check, there was a little bit of confusion when Tom O'Brien was speaking. I just wanted to clarify with Mr. O'Brien that that he was recommending disapproval, and if he could just give us a couple of words on that, because there was some confusion when he was speaking.
Councilmember Shealy, can you hear me now, sir?
Yes, sir. Very clear.
I'm sorry, my camera's not working, but yes, sir, you are correct. I was recommending to not approve this item for the reasons Jason explained there in person, and myself is we need to look in the future and not just now, and the potential for high land along the water with sea level rise and potential for potentially a park and having long-term vision. We've had some of these items come up before, and there's been recommendations in some cases for approval, but in most of the cases along the waterfront, we've recommended not for approval.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Gregg, then Seekings, and Saccharin.
It's unclear to me from all the graphics we have exactly what we're talking about quit claiming. And so has any of what was formerly 3rd Avenue been entitled at all?
No. In 2018, there was a similar request from a neighbor 2 lots up, Mr. Meislin, and that was denied.
Do we have a graphic that shows this a little?
There should be right here.
Okay. So it's that whole.
That's 3rd Avenue.
So this.
Sorry, in the packet, in the packet for your agenda.
It's in your agenda.
It's just the highlighted section. Is that this yellow highlighted section? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Councilmember Seekings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Procedurally, how does this work? So does a citizen come to us and ask us to abandon and it naturally deeds over to them?
For paper rights of way like this, the city can do it on its own initiative, or we can respond to an application by an adjacent property owner. Yes.
And so this was an application from the adjacent property owner for us to abandon and then quitclaim deed back over.
Correct.
Why would we do that? I mean, I don't.
We have done it in the past. I'm sure the reasons are always varying, but
Councilmember Saccharin.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This is actually in my district, just barely, and I have had opportunity to speak with the applicant. Two questions I have. Number one, in the past, in that area, have we gone through and approved the request of the property? I know the one instance was with Mr. Meisland, but was there any other instances we approved these requests?
I believe with 8th Avenue, that was a request that was satisfied.
Okay.
But Mr. Meisland's request on 3rd was denied.
Okay. I understand that we need to look to the future, but in this particular instance, having the history that it's been going on for at least 20 years, I'm going to support her request, and I'd urge my fellow council members to also consider that. Had lengthy conversations. She's done her homework. I get the rationale from the city side, but I'm gonna vote to support this.
Mayor Tecklenburg.
Thank you. One question for planning. The lot, I heard it mentioned that they wanted to build a home on their lot. Is it, are they able to proceed to build a home on the lot without this addition from the city?
Ms. Casey might be able to speak to this because you've had conversations with Mr. Batchelder now.
Well, I mean, from a zoning point of view.
I believe she can. Hold on. Sorry. Mr. Morgan?
Mayor and members of council. So it's zoned SR2 over there, I believe. So that's like a 6,000 square foot minimum lot. It has 25-foot front setbacks, 9-foot side setbacks. So I would think it does have some irregular shape there, and there could be issues with critical line buffer areas. But it would seem like, given the amount of lot area that is owned, that a house could be placed in that location without this extra land.
Well,
maybe the applicant can answer this for us, but is there a hardship if we do not grant this request to her?
Ms. Casey.
No hardship. Except for the fact that in 2019, a large tree on the sliver fell over onto my property and damaged a wall. And at that time, Mr. Wilkerson of the Urban Forestry came out and he said he believed that it would be fine to have the city do this to relieve the city of the potential future further having to pay for cleanup, and to also ask me permission to cross my property to get to this sliver. It's landlocked. You can't get to it unless you ask my permission to go across my property to get to it. So it's a cleaning up of the section. And there's a lot of high ground of paper 3rd Avenue all to my left, but right behind, adjacent to my property, it is only an embankment down to the marsh.
So just to be clear, we own the land that's being asked to be abandoned. Is that correct?
Right. It is our right of way.
It's our right of way. Can we, besides waiting 100 years to do something, is that land usable for any other purpose right now?
Other than a passive park, no, it's completely overgrown right now.
I grew up in this area, spent a lot of time back around this portion of the land, and I know what you're talking about. And we would, play out there and walk around that area. It's beautiful, and it's going to give a nice view, I suspect, from there. So there's some benefit to the city at some point if we maintain ownership and control the park. But I understand your concern. That's why I asked the question, whether or not there was any hardship to you if we don't do that.
And maintaining ownership of the whole paper avenue of Third Avenue makes sense for the city to do. The piece that I'm discussing is that little yellow triangle of the drop off of Third Avenue. Third Avenue will drop off at that triangle, and it's literally an embankment down to the marsh. So it's a sliver of the Third Avenue, 8th Avenue come back.
Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Can someone clarify quickly? She said that our sliver, let's just call it the yellow sliver, is landlocked? Or can we access it?
Right now, we deeded 8th Avenue to the adjacent owners, so there is no city land that we can cross over to get there. We can get to 3rd Avenue if we start at 3rd Avenue and walk the length of the marsh, so we can access it. We just couldn't access it through 8th Avenue anymore.
Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Kronsberg, I'm sorry. I'm gonna be a little selfish. The district that I'm proud to represent is an interior district. So anytime any other district on council, all 11, has the opportunity now and in the future to create access to the waterway, public access to the waterway, I'm gonna be for that. Okay, and I'll tell you why. Because the folk from the district that I represent can come and visit your district and all the way around this table. Linear parks are just absolutely wonderful. Right now it's unkept. So we're gonna give it away because we don't wanna go in there and prune it and give access from 3rd Avenue. I haven't seen it, but I know one thing: with the proper equipment, we can unlock the actual beauty for everybody to behold. And if I listen to the property owner, she basically wants the tree fixed, pruned, or whatever can be done. What's the name of and the reason I call Mr. Kronsberg to the microphone, what's the name of the Irish Park? I think it's at the end, is it Elizabeth Street?
The Charlotte Street Park.
Charlotte Street. And that's basically a street right away. I invite all y'all to go visit it. It's the width of a street that continued right into the waterway, virtually the same size as this. But it's amazing what $2 million could do. And that's what happened. That's why we can enjoy that right now. It was not deeded away, and it's in the public realm. But for overgrowth, many other persons can enjoy this as well. So I don't know of a situation where we have basically 2 department heads, and we pride ourselves in the quality of work and recommendations that our department heads come forth with. We've got not 1, but 2 department heads that oversee a major portion of this city. Public Works, and obviously our Park and Recreation capital projects with Mr. Kronsberg. There's no way I'm gonna go against the recommendations of the institutional knowledge that these 2 gentlemen have, that we always give kudos to. They overwork, underpaid, and they've come and given us the best advice that they have to offer. So on this one, I'm gonna have to support staff on this, and I pray that one of these days we can unlock the beauty in the public realm for all to enjoy. Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I think the mayor had another question.
Mayor Tecklenburg.
Thank you so much. I did want to share respectfully that during our comprehensive plan, we did a lot of analysis on the creep of marsh over time with sea level rise, and anything along the marsh's edge is likely to see that occur. So to have a buffer any place that we've got it, I think is important. And then I mean, we've been talking about a perimeter protection of the peninsula for 3 or 4 years now. And, you know, I know the plans for Wagner Terrace neighborhood may not currently go up into this area of marsh, but I mean, we can't, it seems to me with all the need we have for perimeter protection, to give up any perimeter just doesn't make sense right now. Respectfully, I'd love to accommodate Ms. Causey's requests otherwise, but she does have access to her property by the end of 8th Avenue, and by zoning, she can build a house on it. She'll be able to enjoy, you know, the vacant city property in front of her home for probably years to come. And anyway, I for all those reasons above, I would vote against this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are any other council members wishing to be heard? Councilmember Gregg.
Another question. Just for clarity for everybody here, all of the parcels north of former 3rd Street are also city parcels. So that wasn't clear from the information, but that's all city property. So I think that's important to note, that it's not technically landlocked. That further opens the waterfront. So parcels ending in 3082, TMS numbers 3082, 0002, 0009, 10, and 1. That's all city property. So thought everybody should know that.
There's not a motion pending on the floor. Would someone like to offer a motion regarding this action?
Move for denial.
Second.
So just so that we can move under regular procedure, if you want to make a motion to approve in a second, it would fail when you can vote nay, and it just makes it a little more clear for the public.
Okay. Move for approval then.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded for this item. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. All opposed?
Nay.
The nays have it. Motion fails. All right, moving right along. Public hearing number 2, and I believe we have Mr. Morgan from the Planning Department.
Yes, sir. Get the screen going here. Okay. All right. This is public hearing E2, 3, 5, 7, and 9 Cunnington Avenue. It's a request to rezone 1.16 acres. This is, of course, property the city has acquired. This would take it from the light industrial district to the Upper Peninsula UP district, and also from the 2.5-story Old City Height district to the 412 Old City Height district, which is the companion height district for the UP district. And we'll go through a few slides here. And just to orient you, of course, Meeting Street is just to the west of this. This is in the midst of the cemeteries that are in the Cunnington Avenue area. There's a cemetery to the south of it, a cemetery to the northeast of it, as well as then directly across the street to the north, across Pershing Street. And then there is a auto repair business to the west and other businesses along Meeting Street to the west. In our comprehensive plan, it is in the job center area. It was industrial, and that is why it ended up in the job center area. But once the city was able to acquire it, and our plans are for affordable housing, it makes sense that this would shift over to the UP zoning. And we do have some images that show how it was studied to be part of the UP district when we did all those studies about 5, 6, 7 years ago. And this is just from the future land use recommendations job center. But again, now that it would not be industrial, that doesn't really apply as well. Here is the study from the UP analysis that showed this site as a particular site that could be in the UP district. And here's an aerial image of the property. These houses have been demolished, and it is getting prepared for the affordable housing that will ultimately be built there. Another image of it shows you some of the surrounding cemeteries, street view, some of the houses that are no longer there. And again, looking towards Meeting Street on Cunnington. And that's the next door auto repair business. And this is just a comparison between the light industrial, which is 19.6 units an acre, and the UP, which is 26.4. Plus, once you go over 4 stories, if you earn it through the different points in the UP district, you can have more density than that. And that's why it's attractive for the affordable housing. Our planning commission reviewed and did recommend unanimously its approval to move to the UP district and to the 412 height district.
All right, thank you, Mr. Morgan. Madam Clerk, has anyone signed up to speak on this matter?
Anthony Bryant.
I'm always in full compliance. I want to shout out my council member, Robert Mitchell, dear friend of mine for many years, and his efforts. Last meeting, I didn't get a chance to shout him out and what he's doing in District 4. It's very challenging in that district in the zoning and the Administrative Procedure Act because the mission and vision in the city is not a part of the criteria to determine whether or not an approval with condition, a denial is not clear to the public. And because you're facing redistricting, which would decimate your district pretty much without the Justice Department doing the map, it has to go to a federal court, which many people in our community can't afford lawyers to defend your district. We support any effort you put out for District 4.
And those are all the speakers that we had signed up.
Would anyone else like to come forward and be heard on this matter? All right, if not, the matter comes to council.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please.
I have a,
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Mitchell.
yeah, this is in the district I represent, this is the Upper Peninsula, up in but what I want to say, once if this is approved, and it'll be approved, but before we start any building, if I'm still here, I want to make sure that I'm strictly involved in this particular aspect, because I have a lot of development going on in the district as it is right now. So I want to make sure that I'm involved in that particular with anything that's going to happen in that particular area when this happens. So I just want to put that in the motion and make sure that I'm involved with it, because if not, then I'm going to, come and fight against it. So you know how I go with that. I just want to make sure that we all at the table and the communities at the table too. But I know it's a different area in that area, but then everything is moving in Upper Peninsula, moving up north. And I know that you'll see some buildings going up there now. And I want to make sure that even if we do this, there's some affordable housing going to be in there for people to be able to afford if we get to that point, if I'm still here. So I'm just going to put that in the record as of now.
Duly noted.
And the mayor also has his hand up.
Mayor Tecklenburg.
So just wanted to remind council that this is the site that the city owns, that we in fact intend to put affordable housing on it. And also our hopes to provide wraparounds, but also to provide transitional and affordable housing. That's the whole purpose of the site. And when we discussed this at council a few months ago, I forget who recommended it, but they said we ought to try to maximize our density for affordability on the site. And that's what this is all about. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council members wish to be heard? All right, if not, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Item 3.
The next 2 items are going to be adjacent one another in the Washington Street and Charlotte Street area.
Can you repeat that, Councilmember?
Take items 3 and 4 for public hearing together. So moved.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye. All opposed? All right, items 3 and 4 together.
Okay, and I'll publish those now. This is the first one, E3, is 77 and 75 Washington Street. It's basically a third of an acre. This would be a rezoning from GB to MU Workforce Housing, MU2 WH. And then moving on to E4. That one, to get the exact address, that is 8 Charlotte Street. It's almost a 1/4 acre. And again, it's a request from general business to mixed use workforce housing MU2WH. Slides that show you where these are. This is just off East Bay Street. To the east, the dark color is the ports area on the eastern side of Washington Street. There's already been a companion rezoning just to the north of this on current vacant area that has a laydown yard. It is now MU2 workforce housing and has plans going through the BAR process now. And of course, those plans would also apply to these parcels as well. This is it. These parcels are all in our future city plan for our city center recommendation, which would be the most intensive types of uses. They are immediately adjacent to the port. They are on the main traffic corridor there on East Bay Street. So that is why staff has been supportive of these requests. City center, of course, are the buildings that are the buildings of greater significance in the city as far as height, scale, mass, those types of things, and density. That's what the explanation is from the city plan here. Here's an aerial image of the property that does have a historic house on it, and they are working through the process with the BAR on that historic house to potentially relocate it. This is an image with the Ports Authority in the foreground and the subject property. There is an older plumbing supply facility that's going to have a new laydown yard next to it that will be the northern boundary of all of this property. Here's just a street view from Washington Street and into the port, and again from Washington Street, and just a comparison from the GB to the MU2WH. And I'm going to go on to the next one, which is E5, which is, E4, which is the corner of East Bay and Charlotte. And that's the 8 Charlotte Street. And again, similar images here that show the comp plan and the same recommendation from the comp plan, and aerial images. Currently, this site is occupied with a drive-through teller. And there you see the sites side by side that are up for rezoning, and street view and comparison. So Planning Commission recommended for both of these unanimously to be rezoned to the MU2WH.
All right, thank you, Mr. Morgan. Madam Clerk, has anyone signed up for this matter?
Anthony Bryant.
In 2010, I filed a public complaint to the EPA regarding the Ports Authority's lack of transparency in terms of public hearings at their meetings or the public speaking at their meetings. This zoning in 2010 is connected to the MOU that was done in North Charleston. And in 2007, I made public comment, I'm gonna give it to Jennifer for the record, at Randolph Hall, the College of Charleston, regarding a study of local governments. And Mayor Summy, Mayor Rowley was at this meeting. I spoke, Dudley Gregory actually spoke at the meeting as well, in terms of the Ports Authority and its impact on our area. Now, mind you, the Ports Authority has had a public comment that I missed regarding this area and what they're doing rezoning through DHEC. We hope that DHEC puts out or reintroduces the public hearing again, so we can kind of get the city of Charleston's response in terms of what you're doing in terms of this issue.
Thank you, sir.
Those were all the speakers that we had signed up.
Would anyone else like to come forward and be heard on items 3 and 4 on the public hearing agenda? Yes, sir.
We don't want to know y'all are only getting what falsely little amount you're getting out of what, $9 billion.
Would you mind speaking? Into the
Well,
mic?
y'all get like $9 billion a year out of our backyard, and like we might be better off just having fishing in there than like have all the oil and runoff. And your park system's like messed up, because I was reading the Bible out front, and one of your like city planners kicked me out of the Martin Luther King pool, and I'm Americans with Disabilities Act. So like, and I'm bringing legislations against municipal ordinances, which is the supremacy clause of the 14th and First Amendment. And I'm calling the FBI tomorrow on you people, because you keep telling the police to come talk to me when I'm reading the Bible as a Holocaust of second generation survivor. So you want me to continue? I'm telling the FBI tomorrow on City of Charleston. The supremacy clause says that if the Supreme Court rules on it, it becomes the law of the land, and you will not get matching highway funds. We have a federation with a standing army. No one in this Charleston militia is I went to UC Berkeley. My last name's on King Street. So that's what's about to happen to y'all. And y'all are going to be the ones telling the police to violate the Constitution by doing these municipal ordinances.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to come forward and be heard on this matter? If not, the matter comes to council.
Mr. Chairman,
All right. It's been moved and properly seconded. Councilmember Mitchell.
yes, both of these items is in the district I represent too. Well, you'll find most of the developments that happen in the peninsula is the district I represent. So even with the housing part, I'll be getting with the developers who's going to be developing the property, which I spoke with them on a previous occasion, and trying to get them to even put some housing that's going to be in there 60% of the medium income, which is very hard because of what's going on now, the cost of property and the cost of materials. But we need to have some of those 60% apartments in there also, so people still can be able to afford on this peninsula. See, I'm taking this very, very seriously and bringing, having apartments affordability for the people who are working in this peninsula, working in these hospitality fields and places like that. And even some of the people who was living here can't not live here anymore that can come back to some of this again. I know it's not going to be the same, but we have to, when we're doing housing, we have to try to do as much as possible for everyone. And this is why I'll be talking with both the developers and pushing that very, very much. So you'll see me coming back with that. So I've spoken with them before they started, and I had them to talk to the neighborhood association, which they're not in the neighborhood associations of Mezquite-Ragsboro, but they're across the street. So they have mentioned it to them. So they voted on, they're satisfied to the point that they know this what's going to be happening there. So I told them the same thing too, that I'm pushing to see if we can get some housing apartments there. So it's going to be 60% of the median income, because everything they're talking about is 80 to 150% of the median income, and we cannot afford those things here on this peninsula anymore. So we got to do some better things in zoning and everything else too. Thank you.
Would any other council members like to be heard on this matter? Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Mitchell, I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan, mixed use workforce housing. So is this where they're going to develop the property and we get specific units, or can you clarify that? So if they're going to build, can you give me an example of what they're looking to do with the property? If they build X amount of units, we get so many affordable units out of it?
No,
Okay.
This is privately owned. And we are working with them. I was working with the developers, who was developing it, and I spoke with him on period occasion and tell him what I'm looking for, and they were going to try to do it. They're still going to try to do it. So I don't know if they come up with an inclusive, what they're going to build yet, Ms. Johnson. They haven't come up with exactly.
Councilmember Mitchell, can you talk into the mic?
Yeah, talk to Ms. Johnson. I don't think they have come up exactly what they're going to build, if they're going to be anything 60% of the median income yet. On Washington Street. Not yet. Well, I was spoken with them and I had them at the neighborhood meeting at Mezquite-Ragsboro, so I don't know what they're going to do quite yet, but they'll be getting back with me and I'll be talking with them and seeing if they can try to put a few units there, but they don't really have to, if you may. So that's one thing I have to try to push, and I try to push all developers in doing that. And they normally come up and give me a few, so it's something that, we don't have any authority over, if you may, in the zoning process. But 75 Calhoun, 77 Washington Street, and 75 Washington Street, anyone who lived in the city of Charleston, grew up in the city of Charleston, would know what 75 and 77 Washington Street was way back when. So it's a lot of history back there on that street, on Washington Street. So this is what I'm kind of pushing with the developers.
Councilmember Parker.
Yes, thank you again. Mr. Morgan, can you just clarify for me?
Yes, ma'am. And your question was?
Just the amount of units that the mixed use workforce housing MU2WH classification would then allow the property, how many units?
Typically, it would require 20% of the units to be affordable units.
Okay. Thank you.
And we have heard the developer, we can't make them commit through the rezoning process to a certain number of units, but they have said that they want to have at least 10% of their units as affordable, and then the others would be fee in lieu, which has been substantially upgraded too.
Mr. Chairman, that's what I was alluding to, that they told me that they was going to put some units there. That's going to be 60%, and then they're going to do a mixture with the fee in lieu, because I was trying to put them to get the units in there instead of the fee in lieu, and trying to get the units placed in there. But this is what they said they might do, so I'm just holding them to that, what they said to me, and I'll get back with them on that.
Councilmember Rappel.
Yeah, so as Christopher alluded to, zoning doesn't come with any strings attached other than what's in the zoning code. So we're not approving a specific development tonight. We're just giving, I believe, first reading to this MU2WH rezoning, which provides a whole lot of options to a developer to do a lot of different things. I mean, they could just pay the fee out and go 100% market rate in there if they want. The property could change hands the day after we rezone it, and it'll be worth a whole lot more money after we rezone it to MU2WH. So the only way we're going to know what we're getting is if there's there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can do it through PUDs. You can do it through, I don't think this property is large enough for a development agreement. It's nowhere close, but that's the problem with rezoning. It's a bit of a hope and a prayer and relying on good people that you're dealing with to honor those commitments that Councilman Mitchell said. I mean, there's not a whole lot of other options that we had, but I just wanted to clarify maybe that. And just real briefly, Councilwoman, this zoning scheme essentially provides two options. I mean, you could either do the workforce housing on site, or you can pay the fee. We recently increased the fee, but I think the vast majority of developers have chosen just to pay the fee and, forego actually building the housing. But of course, that's a big part of what funds Ms. Johnson's department, and they do a tremendous amount of work leveraging those resources. So just a little background on this. Thank you.
Councilmember Mitchell.
And what I'm trying to do is, when I spoke with them, working out something that they might do half and half, if you may. Pay a fee on some and then do some affordable housing on the other place. So if we get that done, that's the best that I can probably get from them.
There's anyone else who has not spoken wish to speak on this matter from council? If not, I'd like to call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Item 5.
Okay, this is in the neck area of the city. It's at 2003 Herbert Street. It's about a 1/4 acre. It's a request to go from general business to business park. And you can see the property here. Our future public service yard is just to the kind of northeast of this off of Herbert Street. This is a vacant parcel that is nearby and has been general business for a good while. It is in the recommendation in the comp plan for industrial. So the request to go to business park is in line with that. That's what this is saying about the industrial recommendation. It's a vacant property at present. Here's some other images of it from different angles. And you can see our future public service yard and the relationship of this property to that. And the property from the street view. And just the differences between the GB at present and business park, which will require proper screening and things like that. So it should be an attractive industrial type of use. And the Planning Commission did recommend unanimous approval on this.
All right, Madam Clerk, do we have anyone signed up to speak on this matter?
Anthony Bryant.
And I'd remind those folks speaking on the public hearing matters that the comments need to be germane to the item that is up for consideration. Regular public comment will take place here in a little bit.
Administrative Procedure Act, South Carolina, Title I, notice, procedure, effective date, and judicial review. We would hope that the votes that you make is in compliance with your mission and your vision statements posted online. And in the third reading, the public is given notice in terms of the time limit for you to file a complaint to appropriate state or federal agency and/or a court.
Thank you, sir.
Those were all the speakers we had signed up.
Would anyone else in attendance like to come forward and be heard on the matter for item 5? All right, if not, the matter comes to council. All right, it has been moved and properly seconded for item number 5 on public hearings. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All
Aye.
The ayes have it. Item 6.
This is a parcel in the Canehoy area, just off of Clements Ferry Road near Jack Primus. It is a portion of TMS 268-00-00133. It's approximately 105 acres, of which many of the acres are wetland area. The request is to go from light industrial to single-family residential SR2. To orient you all to the site, Jack Primus Road is on the northeastern corner. The end of the property just barely touches on Jack Primus, but will not actually have access there because of wetland issues. The old Mikasa, now the Gildan facility, is at the corner of Jack Primus and Clements Ferry Road. The Charleston Regional Business Park is to the west, southwest of the property. We have some other images that'll give you a sense of this area. This area was an area that was changed in the new comprehensive plan. The areas along Clements Ferry were recommended for greater intensity, but the area in the middle here that this comprises had a lot of wetland area. So it was recommended, of course, that the wetlands would remain and that the non-wetland area would be suburban in nature. And that is in line with the request we are seeing here. Let me get to my page here. So yes, it was suburban and natural or wetland in the comprehensive plan. So this request is in line with that. I'll show you a few more images that give you a good sense of the character of the property. It is again, suburban and natural wetland. You can see here the wooded nature of it, and then the different striations of the colors of the green that show where some of the wetlands are. We also have some images that show the wetland coverage. Again, here you see the Gildan facility to the northeast. This is a plat of the property. They will have access from Clements Ferry Road across some other commercial properties at the front, and they will not have access out on Jack Primus because of wetland coverages. And this image, it may be a little bit hard for you all to see, but you can see the kind of trailing wetlands that weave through the property that make it extremely difficult to use for industrial purposes. There also are other uses coming in the near future in this area. We are currently reviewing an apartment complex that would front on Clements Ferry Road in front of the property. There would be other commercial development as well as the access for this property coming out to Clements Ferry, just to give you a sense of what's going on in the surrounding area. Just a zoning comparison, right now they're allowed 19 units an acre under light industrial, but they do have to build to an industrial standard. Under the SR2, it's down to 7.3 units an acre. That is in line with the comprehensive plan. And Planning Commission did recommend unanimously for approval of this rezoning.
All right, thank you, Mr. Morgan. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone signed up to speak on this matter?
Anthony Bryant.
Administrative Procedure Act, South Carolina, Title I, again, notice, procedure, effective date, judicial review. I don't live in Berkeley County, right? So I don't live in Berkeley County. So I got a letter from South Carolina Law Enforcement Division where I have to make this comment here. I live in the ninth Judicial Circuit 20 years ago was publicly corrupt. That's a fact. That's a fact. And dealing with land use issues. Now, Google did well waters, groundwater in that area. So the groundwater is being tapped big time in this area. We want to hope that this massive developments that you have in Berkeley County, that it's not going to usurp the water and groundwater in that area. And DHEC got a complaint from me years ago in that area regarding Google and the amount of water they took and the impacts it may have on existing residents who's been there for years, who may have a problem with their water down the road.
Thank you, sir.
Those were all the speakers that we had signed up.
Would anyone else like to come forward and be heard on this matter? Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you for hearing us tonight. My name is Todd Richardson. I'm the applicant on the project. I'll be happy to answer any questions. We respectfully request the rezoning. I was involved several years ago with the parcel just to the west, which was the other Mikasa parcel separated by the Carolina Bay wetland. That was an approved concept plan, which was then converted back to light industrial for Dominion to have lay down and utility space. That was with the overall partnership that owns these parcels to be subdivided. So the thought is to come in with something with less of a density that was there. So questions came up about the ability to develop a lot of units here. The majority of this parcel is wetlands. There is no plan to fill any wetlands on it. It's nestled somewhat, so it is inappropriate for industrial development, which would have basically filled all the wetlands here. So our goal is to follow and comply with TRC, city stormwater, and Dutch dialogue standards to come in with a medium density neighborhood. Also, we have been part of a total traffic study, which just came in, which has, if
Thank you. All right, does anyone else want to be heard on this matter? If not, the matter comes to council.
I think a gentleman's coming.
Yep. Go ahead.
Fred Lincoln, Sarah Lincoln Road. We did not go before the planning commission because I don't know if the sign was taken up. Even for this meeting, I learned about this meeting early this morning because I don't think this sign was placed up until Monday, yesterday. Our concern is this. There's no coordination between Berkeley County and the city of Charleston. Upper 41 is being inundated with development, right from 800 homes on the development to a maximum total we have right now 3,300. When you include the Keenhoy plant.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councilmember Waring.
I'd like to ask council to allow Mr. Lincoln a little bit more time, in particular, if proper notices were put down and people couldn't respond to the public hearing that was held at the planning commission and now at city council, if the council would allow.
Is there an objection for 30 more seconds from council? Without objection.
Can we ask for another minute? Mr. Lincoln has for those who are new to council, Mr. Lincoln has been a stalwart leader out there. As a matter of fact, when the port wanted to put the global gateway at the tip of Daniel Island, Mr. Gregg, it was grassroots efforts by Mr. Lincoln and grassroots people out there, Ms. Mary Skinner and others who, quite frankly, if it wasn't for the grassroots effort, State Port Authority would be right on the tip of Daniel Island right now. So I know he's new to you all, but I can't tell you, but for his community activism. Now, not just him, I mean, others as well, but he's certainly a stakeholder out there and very much a leader. What we see have taken place on Daniel Island and Keenhoy Peninsula would not be done the way that it's unfolding. So,
is there objection for an additional minute? All right, without objection, so ordered. Go ahead.
I want to thank the council for that. What we see is in our areas being inundated with residential. We are concerned that in the future, we won't have any property for commercial. Commercial benefit our community. Goodland is down the street. We have folks able to walk to work. People can ride bicycle to work. What does 9,000 acres is being developed? Over 95% residential. So for our folks to go to work and having to leave the community is a hardship on them, the prices of fuel, and for the future of our community, we see overdevelopment in residential property. We would like to see this area, this whole area that we speak of right now is zoned residential, zoned commercial. Commercial property left in place for future development.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to be heard on this matter? All right, if not, the matter comes to council. Yes, Councilmember Gregg.
Thank you for your comments on Mr. Lincoln. He's a legend on the Keenhoy Peninsula. I'd like to reiterate Mr. Lincoln's comments that there's very little coordination right now between Berkeley County and the city. It actually may surprise all of you, but there is no parks or recreation planned for the Upper Cainhoy Peninsula. We have no property up there for parks and recreation for these 9,000 housing units that are potentially coming up there. So if we are going to approve this, I think the city needs to step up and provide the necessary infrastructure for those areas. I do have a question about the traffic counts and what the plans are. And also I had a question on how they were going to access Clements Ferry Road, because it looked like from your presentation that was going to be potentially shared curb cut on Clements Ferry.
Yes, sir. So as far as the access, so. Hundreds of feet further back into the side. The property is about 600-700 feet, something.
That sounds about right. And there's an access easement that will come through the front parcel as commercial mixed use.
And so this would remain in the light industrial, which also allows commercial zoning down here, but there would be shared access through here with a joint access roadway, correct, Mr. Richardson?
Yes, it's coming to the left of about where site is. I think that's where the easement is going to be agreed upon. Yes.
And there is, I failed to also point out, there is a new industrial building coming here in the Charleston Regional Parkway, right at the corner of Charleston Regional Parkway and Clements Ferry. And as Mr. Richardson noted, the Dominion facility that's going to be a lay down yard and facility that a number of their folks work at for regular maintenance of their facilities will be back in this area up against the Jack Primus Road area, but not connecting to it.
So for clarity, this proposed concept plan for the Mikasa apartments, and then this new development, which is, I think it's 107 housing units is what's planned.
Roughly is what the yield is.
They would share the curb cut on the Clements Ferry Road.
There's an easement that's going to be going through the front parcel
Okay.
only to Clements Ferry. There will be no connection to Jack Primus.
Okay.
That will be a shared access, but
All
it
right.
will be a dedicated access for the rear parcel to access Clements Ferry.
And will you have to have you done the traffic counts yet?
The traffic study has been completed. It's been submitted to the city of Charleston and SCDOT. The recommendations are for the eastbound lane, which would be going from plan left to plan right. That will be a left turn lane, which is already in a planned median with 200 feet of storage and 200 feet of bay taper. Also on the westbound lane, which is plan right to plan left, we will have a right turn deceleration lane with 200 feet of storage and a 200-foot taper bay.
So how will people turn, I guess, from going east, turning left out of your property?
Left out of the property will go into the median.
Okay.
There'll be a joint intersection median with a turn lane in the middle to then access to the two lanes that are currently being constructed right now,
Okay.
going eastbound.
And no stoplight?
The stoplight is at Jack Primus.
Okay.
As you know, it's existing, but this is far enough away where that is not warranted.
Okay. Any change in speed limit there? Because that's a 55-mile-an-hour section, right?
I do not know from what I have read in the traffic study, there's not a recommended speed change. If that were to occur, it would actually not occur from the development or from the city of Charleston. It would occur from SCDOT.
Okay, I didn't know if they had if they'd recommended a speed limit change there.
Yeah, I think the biggest part is the decel and also the access of a wide turning lane in the median itself to help alleviate that. Also with the two lanes, it is considered that most traffic will be going left in the left lane going westbound as people are approaching that intersection.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Waring.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move for deferral on this one.
Second.
Just some of the questions that Mr. Gregg came up with. A lot of information, the traffic study, obviously community input. A ton of information on this one that's just really, we shouldn't be making sausage on the floor of council. And if we would, because I'd like to get more information on it, frankly. It's been moved and seconded.
It has been moved and properly seconded for motion for deferral, which takes precedence. Is there any discussion on the motion to defer? Councilmember Shayed.
I just wanted to chime into what Councilman Gregg is talking about, infrastructure. Just I know the issues that we're having over there now, particularly with fire stations and building fire stations over there, servicing the area. We just did an MOU that we finally included Mount Pleasant to take part covering some of this area as well. So I know there's some concerns about this property coming online. Mr. Morgan, if by not deferring this, but as a property stands right now in light industrial, what is allowed on that property for development now?
It allows, industrial uses, commercial uses. You can do residential to 19 units an acre. It's actually denser for residential, but you do have to build to an industrial fire code standard. So that makes it problematic.
And does it also reduce the number of units as well?
I'm sorry?
It also reduces the number of units allowed from single family residence to light industrial.
No, light industrial is 19.4 units an acre. The single family would be 7.3 units an acre. So it's actually a reduction in density to go through with the rezoning.
All right. Anyone else wish to be heard on the motion to defer? All right. If not, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion to defer, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Item 7.
Move to take 7 and 8 together for public hearing.
It has been moved and properly seconded to take 7 and 8 together. Mr. Morgan.
Okay. And these are two very minor corrections in our zoning ordinance. We discovered in our zoning chart that there were missing in the E7 item, that there were a couple of missing density comparisons in the SR districts. That's what E7 is. Literally, it's just adding a few numbers that should be on a chart that were not there. It doesn't change anything about the way the ordinance is regulated. And then in E8, it is a clarification that in the residential office district, which was not intended to be an area that has residential uses in it, that there was a error on one of the charts that would have potentially allowed multifamily uses in residential office, and this is correcting that to not allow those.
All right. Has anyone signed up to speak on this matter?
Anthony Bryant.
Administrative Procedure Act, South Carolina, notice, issue, regional partnership as a part of your mission and vision. That should have been a criteria to the public in terms of the notice not being provided. 1, 2, the procedures took place. Gentleman came, had a deferral, but you didn't state regional partnerships a part of your mission online. So the regional partnership between Berkeley County and the city of Charleston, and you say they're on the record, it's lacking and doesn't even exist. But the Public Service Commission of South Carolina takes public comments regarding Dominion Energy and rate increases that they've had because of fuel costs. I made public comment on that 2022 recently. So again, you need to be in compliance with your regional partnership mission on all your issues, in particular, all these areas within the zoning ordinances.
Thank you, sir.
Those were all the speakers we had signed up.
Would anyone else like to be heard on items 7 and 8? All right, if not, it comes to council. It has been moved and properly seconded. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Item 9.
Forward to that. Okay. These are several properties along Ashley River Road and Adele Street in West Ashley, 1890 and 1886 Ashley River Road and 1407 Adele Street. It's approximately a third of an acre. And this is property that's owned by the Charleston Redevelopment Corporation, who's interested in having affordable housing here, as well as their new office. The surrounding area is a real mix. If you have retail on the western side of Ashley River Road, just to the southeast of this, on the same side of the street, is a large fuel station. Then there's a residence to the northwest of them and residences along Adele Street. But this is an area that is in our comprehensive plan recommended for suburban type development, and typically you do have densities like you would see in the CT district, which is what is requested here. It would come in from the county as R4 to the CT district, and that is still in line with a lot of suburban areas along key corridors like this. The site is very compromised from just a pure single-family residential standpoint because of the gas station to the southeast. I'll show you some images of it here. Again, the future land use recommendations. The property is vacant. You do have the gas station that's shown there on the left, retail on the right. Here's another view of Ashley River Road. There is a single-family house to the north of it. Planning Commission did review this and felt comfortable with it and recommended unanimously for the rezoning to CT, or for the zoning to CT.
All right, Madam Clerk, has anyone signed up to speak on this matter?
Anthony Bryant.
You're passing? Okay. Would anyone else like to be heard on this? If not, the matter comes to council.
Move for approval.
It has been moved and properly seconded for item 9. Any discussion? Councilmember Waring.
Ms. Johnson, could you come up? I'm gonna support the item, but could you come up and kind of share a little vision on what is envisioned potentially for this site?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, council members. The goal here is, as Christopher reported to you all, to build workforce housing, affordable housing at the site, rental, as well as to support office space for the Charleston Redevelopment Corporation. And if you all recall, this organization is one that was created by the city of Charleston in cooperation with Historic Charleston Foundation and the Housing Authority. They also manage a program called the Palmetto Community Land Trust, such that when properties are transferred into the trust, they are affordable for perpetuity. So a good measure here. It shows sustainability and the ability to leverage funds well. And so we thank you for your support.
Mr. Chairman, obviously, council is going to support that. I thank you for your support on this one. And this is something, Councilmember Ross, when we talked about infill, small projects, we ought to make it easier with some of the bureaucracy. A lot of the affordability for nonprofits, as well as affordable rentals and ownership, West Ashley will, and James Island, to a lesser degree, Johns Island, will come in the form of infill. These little pockets that have yet to be developed. But if they have to come in and undergo some of the same stringent requirements as a normal subdivision, it drives up their costs unnecessarily, which raises the cost of doing and running down these, 16,000 some odd units of affordable housing that prayerfully one day we'll achieve. But anyway, thank you, Ms. Johnson, for your work, and this one has good vision. Thank you for your support.
All right, would anyone else like to be heard on this? If not, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Item 10.
Okay, this is a newly annexed property at 2931 Maybank Highway. It's 6/10 of an acre. It was in the county's Maybank Highway Corridor overlay as limited commercial. It would come into the city as commercial transitional. It is in our comprehensive plan as neighborhood edge, which CT fits right into. The current use of the property is a structure, a residential structure that is going to become an office on the site and be reused. Again, it will meet all the city and county standards for buffering and future uses along Maybank Highway. Just some images here of the site, and the Planning Commission recommended unanimously for the CT district.
All right, Madam Clerk, has anyone signed up to be heard on this matter?
Anthony Bryant.
He may have gone.
And no one else signed up to speak on it.
Okay, would anyone else present like to speak on this matter? If not, the matter comes to council. It has been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Move
Item
to take
11.
11 and 12 together. They're both SR1.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded to take items 11 and 12 together. Any discussion on that? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All right,
Aye.
11 and 12, Mr. Morgan.
Okay, E11 is 2153 West Rivers Road in Riverland Terrace. It's a quarter acre. It was R4 in Charleston County and would come in the city as SR1. And then the other item, E12, is 2158. Let me go to that slide, 2158. Sorry. 2158 and 2154 West Rivers Road, and that is approximately half an acre, and that would go from the R4 in Charleston County to single-family residential SR1, and Planning Commission recommended unanimously for both of these.
All right, Madam Clerk, has anyone signed up to be heard on this matter?
Anthony Bryant.
Pass. All right, is anyone else present wishing to speak on items 11 and 12? Okay, if not, the matter comes to council. It has been moved and properly seconded for items 11 and 12. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. All right.
Move for approval, the minutes for May 10th.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded to adopt the May 10th city council minutes. Are there any additions, deletions? Any discussion? If not, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We will now move to our citizens participation period. Madam Clerk, how many folks do we have signed up?
We have 13 people signed up to speak.
Okay, let's go 90 seconds.
All right, Anthony Bryant.
I don't drive for Uber. I don't drive for Lyft. I'm not an ABNRB. But what happened with the FBI and SLED, and 13 years ago, I received a letter and a complaint I filed with the Department of Justice under OVW programs, community-oriented policing. And what happened was someone was wrongfully convicted of a crime they did not commit and could have been getting the death penalty. A Charleston County resident wrongfully accused of the most serious offense that Black men from George Stinney on have been wrongfully accused for. What happened in Buffalo? That was horrible because the Second Amendment was never designed for what it's designed for. It was designed to protect farmland and rural communities, not giving it in the hand of misguided youth, disgruntled youth with no hope in their lives. Look at the causation of the problem, not the adverse harm you talk about. You're in the causation business, education, public health. That's what you're in the business of, developing young people so they won't feel the need to act in the way they do. Worry about the causation of the problem. That's what leaders do. The great leaders always focus on causation. They never get discouraged by harm. Nelson Mandela.
Time.
Then
Muhammad Idris.
And just while he's coming up, just to remind everyone, you are addressing council as a body. Please refrain from making any direct comments to a council member.
Evening, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, Muhammad Idris. We the poor are not represented on this council. We the poor didn't get together and sent any individual down here to sit on council. Rich people put the average, all these councilmen on city council. We have no representative. I don't care how Black you are, how white you are, the poor is not represented. The people down on the Battery control city council. The rich and the powerful control the city of Charleston. When you could build a multi-million-dollar wall down to the Battery to stop the water, what it is to help people in the neighborhood. We have a solution to help the poverty or the housing problem. We have that. Our councilmen haven't come up with that yet. They're always coming up with the workforce house, affordable houses. Affordable to who? Huh? Is it affordable to Warren Buffett? Because it sure is not affordable to us, the poor. But we do have a solution to the housing problem in Charleston. Thank you. Pride, people ready to improve and develop the environment. Thank you kindly and have a good Memorial Day.
Michael Lesser. Michael Lesser. Zach Vicidi.
My name is Zach Cassidy, and in addition to being a local teacher, I have worked as a pedicab driver for the past 5 years. Last June, City Council decided to expand its pedicab program, offering additional night tags, and in collaboration with a few other members of the industry, we decided to start our own enterprise. However, based on our complaints, that initial bidding in November was canceled. There were serious issues regarding fairness and the inability for a new venture to realistically qualify. But today, that inequity has been addressed, as the law was in part was altered by this council, in part, I believe, based on our complaints. However, more than 5 months after the canceled RFP, the bid has not been put out and the auction has yet to occur. So I'm here to ask the council to remove the red tape and live up to its promises of supporting and encouraging enterprise, set a timeline, and provide entrepreneurs reasonable accommodations, allowing them to compete. My co-owners and I were fired for our ambition, and even more onerous, a family member, not the actual participant, but a family member of our ownership team was fired and blackballed from the industry because of her father's involvement with our venture. With that, I'll end my story and simply ask you to live up to your promises and follow out on the path you set. Your actions and decisions have large impacts that affect the livelihoods of the individuals who call Charleston home. Thank you.
Mark Gould.
Thank you and good evening. I live near the intersection of Ashley and Septima Clark, and I'm here to talk about Gadsden Creek. And I'm here with the backing of a number of other members of the CAJM Environmental Justice Committee who share my concerns. Mainly though, I want to invite council members to take a very close look at the drainage plans for Gadsden Creek. And you will, if you look at them, you have no choice but to conclude that the development will in itself do nothing to address flooding issues that could not be done more effectively without the added impervious surfaces and roofs and driveways and large pipes. In fact, most of the development will drain to the north in a ditch behind Stonyfield Stadium, creating exactly the same tidal flooding situation as they claim they will be solving by filling of Gadsden Creek. So please don't be misled, and I urge you all to look at the drainage plan for yourselves. Thanks so much.
Dr. Coster.
Good evening. Since 2015, it has been my privilege to work with hundreds of children and youth that either living in or attending school in the Gadsden Creek watershed to study salt marsh science and why, when we take care of our environment, we end up taking care of ourselves. Many, many dedicated community adult mentors have volunteered their times to go out into Gadsden Creek with us, which has been deemed by NOAA, South Carolina DNR, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife as a fully functioning tidal creek and federally protected critical wetland. I want to read in the little bit of time I have left some excerpts from the journals of children ages 8 to 15. You'll hear a common theme, and that is their own fear of being evicted or displaced from their homes. 13-year-old. We live in Back to Green, and we think our opinion matters when it comes to making our city better for all of us. We think our community is falling apart. We are being moved from our homes and being dislocated, and it is affecting us. 10-year-old, please don't take away the homes of the animals by destroying Gadsden Creek. I've lost a home and I don't deserve it. They don't either. 8-year-old, Gadsden Creek is very important to me because it is my home.
Joel Sadler.
Joel Sadler, downtown resident and business owner. I don't know if you're aware of this, but I opposed the draft of the memorandum of understanding the bid. I've written college papers shorter than the email I sent y'all this week, so I'm just cognizant of that. I'm not going to repeat myself. I just want to say there's an old adage that if you think everyone else in the room is wrong, you're probably the one that's wrong. And I'm not going to lie, I'm worried that that's me. Because when I read history, I'm compelled to take different policy stances than y'all are time and time again. When I consider everything that makes Charleston a world-class city, the culture, the wealth, the food, even the streets and the buildings themselves, I see it as entirely to thank for the work and contributions of enslaved Africans and their descendants, full stop. And yet, council repeatedly takes a white first approach when making policy decisions for this city. And so when it comes to the bid specifically, I oppose the way that it is structured on those grounds. And all I'm asking you to do is look at it from a black first lens rather than a black last lens, because I don't know how you can look at the jewel of South Carolina and approach it any other way. Thank you.
Lynn J.
I don't know if I can pass these out. Yes. Oh, or I'd like them to go to everybody. I'll give one to you. I'm Lynn Coolj. I'm a member of Charleston Area Justice Ministries and advocate of Friends of Gadsden Creek. A few members of CAJM and I met with Mayor Tecklenburg in March. He told us about a very informative book he had just read, learning about the city's history of filling salt marshes over the past 3 centuries. This book is Low Country at High Tide, A History of Flooding, Drainage, Reclamation in Charleston, South Carolina, by local historian Christina Ray Butler. The author points out that when water can't reach an outfall, flooding occurs. She imparts that new construction and wetlands should be avoided, that Gadsden Creek is one of the only remaining tidal creeks on the Charleston Peninsula. That's what we've got. Some of you voted in favor of filling the creek, and you may have been led to believe that that decision is irreversible. What actually is irreversible is the forever impact that this is going to have on downtown, the land, the people. This is Charleston. And if you refer back to the beginning of public hearings, that first item you all voted down, that was, I think, about a ½ acre. Concrete isn't the answer for flooding. Revitalizing the creek and the wetlands is an integral piece to solving the worsening problem here. Council members Bowden, Saccharin, and Waring attended our Nehemiah action and committed to stop the filling of tidal wetlands, beginning with Gadsden Creek, along with restoring and vitalizing the area. Unlock the beauty, and in the mayor's words, save the buffer. When we know better.
Jerome Harris.
Three months ago, the city council passed an ordinance to establish the HARC. 90 days later, the HARC does not have all of its appointments, nor is there a director of the office responsible for organizing it. On your agenda tonight is an item concerning the burial ground memorial project, which is a great project that will contribute to the opportunity for racial reconciliation. If the HARC was in place, it could be of great assistance to make certain that the investment that you're making in that project is realized fully, because of the HARC's responsibility for working between the community and agencies in these kind of partnerships. We're making error by not moving forward with that. I also want to bring to your attention that June 11th, the 25th annual Remembrance of the Middle Passage, where 12 million African descended Africans were brought from Africa to the United States, to Western Americas, I'm sorry, to Americas. 1.8 million of those people died in a transition. The next time the city council meets will be after that event. It will also be after Juneteenth. when we'll be celebrating the public announcement of the abolition of slavery. Your attentiveness to these matters, I think, is important and sends a message to the community. Please act.
Marcus McDonald. Marcus McDonald. Carl Bloom.
Hello, Council. My name is Carl Bloom, and I live on Johns Island in the city of Charleston. I'm here to speak about in support of restoring and revitalizing Gadsden Creek. We continue to hear the rhetoric of contamination justify its destruction. While on the surface, this may seem to make sense, once you begin to dig deeper, you find that the state of the landfill is actually the city's own fault. The city refused to properly maintain the landfill cap. In fact, in 1969, the Department of Justice threatened to sue Charleston City for dumping 13 years of waste and soil in over 95 acres of wetlands, violating the Federal Rivers and Harbors Act. Charleston City continually ignored warnings from the Army Corps of Engineers multiple times, gathering municipal waste at the Harmon Field swimming pool, which served as an important Gadsden Creek community space. The city of Charleston is responsible for the harm caused by the landfill. Therefore, the fact that the landfill has not been maintained should not be continually used as a justification for filling Gadsden Creek. Thank you.
Joanna Gilmore. Joanna Gilmore. Lashia Oubre. All right, those were all of the speakers that we had signed up. We did
Yeah,
receive.
I believe Mr. McDonald is here.
Oh, thank you.
Hello, my name is Marcus McDonald. I'm lead organizer of Charleston Black Lives Matter. And on the day of May 14th, a white supremacist targeted and massacred 10 African-American people at a Buffalo supermarket. His murder weapon read the words BLM, Dylan Roof, and here's your reparations. Mayor Tecklenburg, who's not here, the city council, many of you should be ashamed of yourself. I really want a lot of y'all to take a look in the mirror because y'all had several opportunities to show Charleston and the world that you're ready to actually listen and reckon with this nation's past and present racial inequities and violent white supremacy. While I'll never shoulder those debts fully on y'all, what you permit is what you promote. And y'all are so quick to chastise and correct me. However, y'all have permitted the right to hinder true progress in the city. There is no two sides on the issue where one side has been oppressed and discriminated for over 400 years and counting, and the other side has amassed wealth and has a privilege to walk out of their home, walk into a church, into a grocery store, into a traffic stop, into the White House, and harass, stab, and shoot and kill whoever they want with nothing against them. They know that they have the privilege to do that. So there's no both sides. There's what's right and there's what's wrong. And I said this before, but how many of us have to die before y'all finally listen? The CER framework for the Commission on Equity needs to be pushed forward by the HARC with increased abilities and no censorship. Y'all politicking while people are dying on the street. Rest in power to my friend Tanny, who died on the street for a preventable thing to be asked for in our commission. That y'all denied, y'all keep denying.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
And those are all the speakers that we had signed up. We did receive some comments online. One person left a comment regarding the introduction of the MOU with Charleston Downtown Alliance for administration of the King Street bid and stated that there were at least 20 vacant storefronts on King Street between Calhoun and Market because smaller local and non-national chain businesses could not afford the rents. All rents would increase even more with the proposed bid assessment, and it did not take $1 million to provide flower baskets and banners on light poles. They also said the sidewalks had become overcrowded with tourists and that the solution was reduced rents, which allowed small business owners and regional businesses to fill the vacant storefronts, and the needs of King Street should not be balanced on the backs of small business owners and residential property owners. One person said it was against the will of the people in the interest of the community to fill Gadsden Creek for the benefit of West Edge. They said flooding occurred when water could not reach an outfall, and the peninsula's outfalls were the tidal creeks that fed into the Ashley and Cooper rivers. The destruction of wetlands was illegal, and Gadsden Creek was one of the only remaining tidal creeks on the peninsula. They also said the city needed a new director for diversity, equity, and inclusion. One person said city representatives were hypocritical for forcing a substantial amount of traffic by 3 veterans' homes as a result of illegally closing of 2 roads during a time when the nation honored Memorial Day. He said after 18 months since council was made aware of the problem, it was time for some relief. And those are all the comments that we received.
Thank you very much. I will be moving on to petitions and communications. Item 1, we have an appointment to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and we also have a Citizen Police Advisory Council appointment as well. All right, there's a motion that has been put forth to defer item C. Is there a second? All right, it's been moved and properly seconded to defer item C. Is there any discussion? If not, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. Item C has been deferred.
1A and B. Second.
It has been probably moved and seconded to approve items A and B. Is there any discussion? If not, please signify by saying aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? The ayes have it.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, just very briefly, I do
Yes,
see
sir.
one of the people we just appointed to the Board of Zoning Appeals, zoning, which is an important position like all of our committees are, is here, Mr. McKay. So I just think we should recognize him and thank him in advance for all the hours he's about to put in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Seekings. Item 2, Community Flood Resilience Support System Pilot.
Thank you, council. Name's Robert Hauk. I'm the GIS Division Director, and I'm joined today by Catherine Roscoe of Deltares, and I'm going to give you a brief update for a project that the city's been a partner on. Give you a little background. The Community Flood Resilience Support System is a partnership between the Department of Homeland Security and Deltares that they found that coastal communities needed an easy, fast flood modeling tool to help with planning. And 18 months ago or so, they asked the city to partner and help test and refine their tool. So since then, we've been meeting weekly. We've had several staff workshops and some on-site staff training, and representatives of Deltares are here this week to do final staff training, and then hopefully this project will go into the future. So I'll just run through a few quick slides. Why'd they pick Charleston? We've got right now that Charleston is increasingly impacted by all of our types of flooding, storm surge, our king tides, extreme rain, and then the compound flooding, rain and tide. And our king tides are getting pretty impactful. The last couple of years, we've had over 8-foot tides in the fall. And that's never going to stop, that the moon will continue to revolve around the earth without reprieve. So with our sea level rise strategy, we're looking at a quote from Dale Morris, our Chief Resilience Officer, 2 to 4 feet of sea level rise over the next 50 years. So what does that look like on top of the flooding that we're already seeing? And that's what this tool is going to help us do. It's to help us see our vulnerabilities, our risks, and most importantly, our opportunities. Where can we start to build plans for mitigation and just to see what the future looks like for, and it was brought up today, that sea level rise was mentioned a couple of times. So our sea level rise strategy says we need to use the most relevant data, and that's what this tool is going to help us do. What data we need? We need historical data, real-time data to help us adapt in real time. And then we need the future conditions. What is sea level rise going to look? Where's the water going to go? How often is it going to flood? When is that going to happen? And how deep is the water going to be? So we're good at those first two. The third one, the future conditions, that we need help. Whoops. And this tool is going to help us visualize the science put out by NOAA and other entities, that we can look at their projections, plug it into the tool, and see what that looks like for Charleston. We've validated the tool. We've plugged in previous storm models and compared that with our damage assessments, and have found that the model output is very accurate. And importantly, this fills a gap in the GIS division's capacity. This tool is going to let us quickly model different scenarios, different risk tolerances, different goals, and different timescales. And this is examples of some of the questions we'll be able to ask. What if we had rain on top of some of those large 8-foot king tides? What will that king tide look like in 20 years? The question is, where is the water going to go with sea level rise? Will there be a need for future buyouts in this area? We can look at areas 20 years in the future and kind of make some informed decisions. An important one to me is how many times of the year will the roads be impassable? A lot of times we're focused on the homes, but before the homes flood, the roads are going to be impassable. And then the question is, what kind of mitigation measures make sense? That if does flood proofing, how long will that help? And elevating, how high do we need to elevate? So and this is a tool supported by the Department of Homeland Security's with the expertise of Delterra's. And I've been proud to help work on it, that the city's been providing input for a tool that one day will help all coastal communities that are experiencing the same flooding impacts that we're experiencing. So with that, I'll turn it over to Catherine Roscoe, who's visiting from the Netherlands.
Hi, my name is Catherine Roscoe, and it's really an honor to be able to be here and present about this tool, which we hope is really going to play an important role in Charleston in planning for sea level rise and other changes that influence flood risk. So this tool, I'm going to try to go through this quickly. It's called the Community Flood Resilience Support System. It's really meant for non-modelers to be able to have more access to understand flooding and impacts under different scenarios. So the community is really central. I won't go through this in great detail, but the kind of questions that Robert was just talking about, what if that storm track had been a little bit further south, or what's going to happen under sea level rise, that these questions are brought into the tool with this user interface that is really intended for technical people, but really non-modelers. So it's much wider group that can do these kind of analysis. You look towards the future by looking at different projections, sea level rise, population growth. You specify events that you're interested in, like king tides, hurricanes, rainfall events. And you can also look at strategies that you may want to consider in the Charleston area, like elevating homes or putting in a flood wall. The model automatically takes these inputs from you and runs a very fast but physics-based flood model and impact model. And it sends these results to visualization, ArcGIS kind of materials that you can view what is the flooding, what are the impacts. So yeah, this isn't so important. These are the names of the software that's in there, the flood and impact model. The important thing is that they run quickly, they are free, and they are physics-based. And like Robert was saying, we have validated them. So I wanted to show how we've been using it in Charleston. Charleston is really a model for the rest of the country. This is going to be rolled out to all coastal communities, and Charleston is serving as the model. And so these are just some community questions we've been discussing in the project. King tides are already a problem. What's going to happen under sea level rise? The Army Corps has a surge protection plan for the peninsula. What about the rest of Charleston? I can barely read it. What's the flood risk when you consider all different types of flood events that can affect the city? And we know an area will be impacted by sea level rise, but when? So these are the kind of questions the tool can answer. And I'm just going to show a couple of results to give you an idea of how we address those questions with the tool. So we looked at two areas. First, I'll show an example for Rosemont, which is a lower income area on the peninsula that will not be protected by the Army Corps seawall. And so we looked at the question, what about the rest of Charleston for this 12-foot event that the peninsula would be protected against? And we break this into an event, a projection, and a strategy. Won't get into that too much right now. When you run the tool, you get a flood map. I'm going to zoom in on a focal area so you can see what we're looking at. Oops, and I went too quickly. Sorry about that. And what you see is zoomed in here for Rosemont. You see the flooding and you see houses in orange or red. Those are homes that are impacted and would be having damage for this event. And so we can look at what if we would raise those homes? That's something that's being considered. What if we would raise them to the same protection level of 12 feet? And you can do that in the tool by selecting those homes and specifying how high you would want to elevate them. And this is a before and after, and I'm going to show a little zoom in here, and you can see the homes that were impacted before the measure. The flooding is the same. It hasn't affected the flooding, but those homes would be elevated above the floodwaters and they wouldn't be impacted. And you can look at this going forward with sea level rise to make sure that this is a sustainable solution. I can't show that here because of time. One thing to consider, you can also see that some of the roads would still be flooded. So that would isolate this neighborhood, even though the homes wouldn't be damaged. So that's also something that needs to be considered. So the other example that I'll show today is for South Windermere. This is an upper middle class neighborhood that's in a very vulnerable flood area. For this one, we looked at the question, king tides are already a problem. How will that look in the future? And so for that, we took a look at last November's king tide, current day conditions, but then we also put a sea level rise, the projected 2050 intermediate scenario, sea level rise for 2050 to see what that would look like. So this is the flood map shown zoomed out for that king tide from November. And just sort of zooming in, and I see it's really hard to see actually, but what you can see is very light blue, but the roads all along this area are flooded, even though the homes aren't very impacted. When the homes are impacted, they show up in sort of orange colors. So that's what happened in November. If we want to see what is that going to look like in the future, we can kind of zoom in, and I hope this is going to be visible. What you see is that flooding in the roads will get worse and you will start to see homes being impacted. So this is not an extreme event. This is not a hurricane. This is a high king tide, what usually happens every year. You may notice some areas, some homes are flooded and not impacted. That may be confusing, but that's because some of the homes, and I just pulled one example here, are already elevated in the area. So that information is also in the tool. This is a do nothing scenario. Yeah. So this is a short, this is the end of this presentation. We've analyzed many more scenarios with measures and under sea level rise, but I don't want to take too much of your time tonight. Thank you for the opportunity. And I'd like to also acknowledge my colleagues, Gundel and Claire, who are here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone on council have any questions for the presenters? Councilmember Shayed.
So what other information are y'all looking for besides what you've already gleaned today?
What other information are we looking for to put in the tool or to analyze with the tool?
Both.
We have a lot of data that's already in the tool. I think Robert can probably speak better to how they will use the tool.
Yeah, that's one of the things. That's one of the things exciting about the tool is we have access to the underlying data. So right now we're using a federal data set for our structures, but we can go in and fine tune the data to get the exact first floor elevations to make the model really accurate for our local community. That a lot of the sea level rise projections, they're national data sets. And this will let us kind of look more of a fine tuned thing just at Charleston, and we can refine and work on the data going forward. So does that answer your question?
All right, anyone else? Councilmember Seeking.
So just briefly, it's fascinating. And I mean, I can see that uses are going to be incredible. I think it'd be important just very briefly, and I see Mr. Morris is here. We're looking at a picture. You don't know you're looking there. That's a wave tank at Del Taurus, which is actually a place. I don't think anyone explained to the members of this council who haven't actually been there, which is the mayor, council member Gregory and me, who or what Del Taurus is. I think you might want to let us know. We've really got some incredible minds working behind us. So tell us just briefly about Del Taurus.
I appreciate that question. So Del Taurus is sort of like a national lab for based in the Netherlands. We're a not-for-profit organization that does all sorts of applied research for water-related issues. And indeed, we have lots of facilities where we simulate large, I think the largest waves. We do things like plant mangroves in that wave tank and then bombard them with waves to understand more about how nature-based solutions can reduce wave heights and just a lot of different type of applied research. And we also, we develop a lot of software that's also freely accessible. So I think we're also known for that. So anyway, so it's really an honor to get to present and be here.
Thank you.
Mayor Tecklenburg.
So, Councilmember Seeking kind of beat me to the punch. I also recognize that wave tank, and that's just a very small portion of this facility. Del Tara is a world-class organization of scientists whose expertise on all things flooding and climate change, I think they're at the top of the game on the planet. They really are. And Charleston was really blessed that we were able to partner with them to create this amazing tool. And when it's fully available, like online, you can come up with your own scenarios for your own neighborhood or any part of the city. What if such and such happened, and be able to see the impacts that can happen to our community by all kinds of flooding, but also what kinds of measures can we take to help mitigate and protect ourselves. And so I just view this as an amazing tool, and thanks also to the Department of Homeland Security. They did help fund the effort. And Robert Houck's efforts and our whole GIS team has just been amazing. So I just wanted to shout out to Robert and Catherine and just let the public and council know just what an amazing tool we have and how thankful we are to Del Taras and their expertise. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else like to discuss on this item? All right, well, thank you for your presentation. I'm going to move on to item 3, the introduction of Memorandum of Understanding with the Charleston Downtown Alliance for the administration of the King Street Business Improvement District. I do want to note that this item is for discussion only. I will turn it over to Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Real quick, they're going to get my presentation. Just wanted to give a real quick presentation. It's a 24-page document, so we wanted to go over a few key items from the draft MOU that's before you this evening. I would emphasize that this is still in draft form, that this is for review and suggestions by the council as we continue to work with the CDA board on finalizing this MOU. Hopefully to be able to bring that back later in June. But we want to hear from the council on their input with regard to this. And I know the CDA is very interested in that as well. So we wanted to go through 3 key provisions. And when I say we, there's myself. We also have Melissa Crustard, Melissa from legal, and then Meg Thompson from my office in the BNS division as well that have been working on this. And then I believe we have some folks from the CDA, Mr. Price and his attorney are here as well that can provide some comment if the council would like. So there were 3 key provisions or areas of the draft MOU that we wanted to go over based on comments that we had heard from the community, comments that we had heard from the council during the process for adopting the Business Improvement District Ordinance. There was a lot of discussion around what the board makeup for the CDA would be, how we would effectuate transparency, and then the services that would be delivered by the CDA as a part of this management agreement. So the first I wanted to go over was board makeup. So again, we heard very specifically that there was an interest and a need and an expectation that there be not just property owners on the board, but also commercial tenants. So the MOU requires at least one of the directors on the board of directors to be a commercial tenant within the district. To also provide a little bit of table setting with regard to the board, the MOU also requires that the majority of the board of directors be property owners within the district, and that the majority of those property owners reside, though not property owners, the majority of those boards of director members be within the Tri-County area. So again, we're not looking for people in Boston, participating in this. We want folks that live, recreate, and do business here locally participating in this. At least one of the directors shall represent a racial or ethnic minority. We again heard that very clear throughout the process, that there was a need from the community to have representation on the board of directors. Now, in all fairness, there is not a lot of diversity amongst ownership on this stretch of King Street. We all know that, but the board is committed to working and ensuring that there's representation on the board of directors for the CDA. At least one board director, it represents women. And then finally, one of the other things that we heard was that, these are public dollars at the end of the day. The assessment equates to public dollars. And so having representation from this council be participating on the board was very important. So again, we've included a provision that one of the directors who would reside in the district be nominated by the mayor and approved by the city council, just as y'all do for all commissions and boards, work that process, that the council in essence would have a representative on the board as well as the property owners. And then finally, in an ex officio non-voting capacity, we would also have a staff member. The CDA will be working very closely with city staff. Right now, this person is essentially Meg Thompson in Business and Neighborhood Services, but that we would have a staff representative that would participate in board activities to provide that connective tissue between CDA and city staff. Let's see, make sure that I've hit everything. Want to be clear because this was a question that came up. So the CDA would be responsible, that board would be responsible for the hiring of any staff related to the management of the bid. That would not be the city that would do that. So if they hire an executive director, that would be the CDA's responsibility to do that. The other thing that I wanted to mention and make clear was that the bylaws for the CDA, which is a nonprofit, either do or will have to make it very, very clear, as the MOU does, that the directors may receive no compensation for their participation on the CDA board and as a part of the bid management team. Transparency. So again, one of the things we heard very loud and clear was that council needs to have a level of oversight with related to this, as much as I think everybody appreciates that this was the private sector who came to the city and said, now's the time, y'all have been working on this or calling for this since the 70s. We have what we feel is a critical mass of folks on the street who are ready to do this. We heard very clearly these will again be public dollars because of the way the assessment is done. So city needs to have some oversight. So we built in some very clear transparency elements here. The first item is that there will be a 5-year implementation plan. They will need to update that 5-year plan as we're currently contemplating it every 5 years. The very first one would be due within 120 days of the CDA's hiring of an executive director or program manager. It would outline the priorities for that first 5-year period. It would describe how they anticipate day-to-day operations going, and they specify the methods for evaluating performance. Then every year there will be an annual report and a planning report that will be due to the city council. The annual report will be taking a look back at what has happened in the previous year. It will talk about how funds were used, accomplishments that were met, and it will report on the status of different metrics that are identified in the MOU as different things that the city would be interested in knowing and hearing more about how the bid has been successful, or at least played a part in addressing improvements on the street. The second element, and this is probably the most important, I think, for the city council, is the planning report. So this is essentially their annual work plan and budget. This would identify the activities for the coming year. It would allocate the funds associated with those activities. And this would have council input via an anticipated annual workshop, budget ad hoc committee, if you would, on the proposed action plan for the year. And it would be done in the spring so that there'd be plenty of time for them to work through that, council to have meaningful input before they submit their budget in line with our budgeting process. And then additionally, there's an annual audit that's required as a part of that planning report. This is very important as it will be conducted and required to be done by an independent CPA. And that report will be delivered directly to the city, directly to the BFRC, and not handed through any intermediaries, so that again, there's that clear accountability with how those public funds are being spent. Finally, service delivery. We heard a lot about trying to understand and better get a handle on service delivery. So there's a few requirements under the service delivery. You'll see a lot of this in, I believe it's Exhibit A in the document. But there's a requirement to have a citizens attitude survey. One of the things that we want to make sure of, is this a good continuing process to have? And so we want that information and feedback. Additionally, the CDA will need to do a pedestrian and visitor count regularly to, again, try to understand what those numbers look like and how that's impacting the operations of the street. And then finally, they will be responsible for implementing the improvement plan that this council adopted as a part of the ordinance that approved the business improvement district. And just a reminder, that includes services related to the street beautification programming, different programming and destination management type activities, promotion and marketing materials that could be produced, as well as economic development like vacancy information, pop-up art things and vacant things. All of that could be under that section there. And with that, we are hitting the home stretch, if you would, of the bid in preparation for an anticipated service delivery schedule in January, February of next year. So we're introducing the MOU because, again, we heard that council wanted to have hands on this and the ability to look at it well in advance of it coming forward to a Ways and Means Committee meeting for action. At present, we're anticipating action potentially, at that June 21st Ways and Means and City Council meeting. All of this is in preparation, like I said, for the start of services on King Street related to the bid in Q1 of 23. And with that, like I said, the city team is here. We have folks from the CDA here as well. We're available for any questions. Otherwise, it's a discussion for you all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that, Robert. Yes, Councilmember Shahid.
Robert, before you get too far, maybe I just missed it. What is the number of board members, directors?
So one of the items that they'll have to do is update their bylaws. At present, I don't believe under the MOU, there isn't a minimum or maximum number of board members. And I don't believe their bylaws currently state a specific number of directors. They will need to update and supply to the city their finalized version of their bylaws, which again, we have some best practices that we found from the bids across the country that we are actually preparing to share with the CDA for them to review for possible inclusion of some of those things in their bylaws that they'll have to update before this becomes effective.
So what are we looking for? Low number, high number?
Meg, do we know? I don't think we know. If you wouldn't mind, Mr. Price is here. He's the president of the CDA. If he has a number, I'll be honest, I'm not sure. The executive committee includes about 10 people, I think, right now.
Would you please come to the microphone?
The board, I think, is 10 or 13 right now, but they do have some advisory positions as well.
Yes, Councilwoman, I'm chairman of the CDA, and right now the bylaws are stated that we can. There's not a high number, low number, but we have 15 people on the board currently, and there's a four-person executive committee at this point. So that could be expanded in any capacity as we choose at this point. Does that answer your
Yeah,
question.
I got
Councilman.
a few follow-up questions as well.
Sure.
Do we have any thought that a certain percentage of these board members, these directors must live in the city of Charleston?
So again, we do have a requirement that the majority of the board of directors live in the Tri-County area.
I heard that. I said city of Charleston.
No, sir. We had a lengthy conversation about that. The reality is that not everybody who owns property on King Street
I think we
lives
need to have at
in
least a
Charleston.
minimum number of people required who live in the city of Charleston on this board.
We can explore what that might look like,
And-
yes.
And why not have a member of city council on this board? Why not have a member of city council on this board?
I don't know that we couldn't. I think the conversation or the concern was that y'all are stretched a little thin. So let's set it up so that the council can appoint somebody. There's nothing, I don't think, that says the council couldn't appoint one of its members as it's written.
Those are just some questions, and I'm not telegraphing anything, but I think those are some issues that I would have some concerns about along those lines. So this is something we can talk about some more between now and June 21st, but
Sure.
Just let you know where I'm coming from.
Well, Councilman, we did have a lengthy conversation on this. The problem that I think we might run into is the actual owners of the properties on the street might not actually reside in the city of Charleston. So they might live in Mount Pleasant, they might live James Island, and that's the issue that we ran into. And so as a result of that, we said, why don't we have it the Tri-County area as ownership? That's how that conversation took. Yeah. Sure, yes.
Councilmember Saccharin.
Thank you, Chair. I won't be long, but I certainly want to just thank Mr. Price for coming back and thank Mr. Summerfield for making some of these changes. I think we're heading in a positive direction, but I still have some concerns. My concerns really are not so much with the landlords, but with the tenants. What survey have we done with actual tenants of those parcels? Not the landlords, the tenants.
Robert, do you want to answer that question on the last surveys that were done? Meg was in charge of those.
Yeah, so as a part of this process, there's been work done by the College of Charleston with the Riley Group. I don't recall, they called them listening sessions. I don't think there was a survey, and I'll let Meg maybe come up. I don't remember how comprehensive that was. The listening sessions that the College of Charleston did, and that was under, like I said, the Riley Center. They had tenants. I'll be honest, I do not know what those specific numbers were. As a part of the signature process, we had efforts being done though by the CDA and by city staff to go out and actually go to the businesses, not necessarily the property owners. Again, it wasn't a scientific survey. It was a, here is the information, here are the listening sessions, please come. But again, I don't think we have specific numbers.
Yeah, and let me add to that also. We had two listing sessions that every single business operator was invited to. So everybody has been invited that's on the street, period. Not business owners, but business operators on the street. Everybody's been invited. And Meg can probably add to that also if she was involved in those listening sessions.
Sure. Two more points, Mayor Pro Tem. May I suggest that some of those sessions may not be listening sessions, that figuring out a way to make it anonymous. I will let you know, I'm a business owner. And if my landlord was vocally in favor of this, I might think twice about saying anything publicly. So I think anonymously, we should make sure that we pull those tenants, number one. Number two, when you look at the assessed value on some of these properties, goes back to the session we had a couple of days ago. If the assessed value is at $1 million, and you correct me if I'm wrong on my math, we're talking about a $10,000 price tag for that business owner. Is that not right?
No.
For the property. So again, one of the things that's important to note is it's for the property. So if it's a multi-tenant building or facility that, that whatever that price tag is, that for the assessment would be broken out, I assume proportionally if it's going back to a tenant versus the property owner. So that's important. And I'm going to look at Meg. We did do the exercise that you requested. I just don't remember if we sent it out. Did we send it out yet? No, we have that though, that gives those samples that you requested, and I apologize.
Okay.
I hoped we would be able to get that out by now, but we haven't.
So is my math incorrect, Mr. Price? If the
I
property
believe
is
it
$1
is.
million, which
Yeah,
is not far-fetched for King Street.
Sure, I'll go through the process real super quick for you, but if you have $1 million property, the assessment value is a 6% assessment value, okay? So of that, so you multiply $1 million times 6%.
Gotcha.
And that is the assessment value, okay?
So
That's, and then that's multiplied by the
Gotcha.
0.0113. There you go.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and we can do the, you can do the math right here, and it's much less than $10,000.
So, and then what assurances do we have in place that the landlord will not pass those additional fees on to the tenant?
That's a private sector right of what they do with their tax bills.
This goes back to my original question.
Yeah.
Polling the landlords is only going to give us one part of the story. Polling the tenants is going to give us a full picture. Because if I'm a landlord, certainly I'd be in favor of this. I'll just pass this on to my tenant.
Well, I can tell you that, and I don't have the polling numbers with us, but most of the operators on the street want this done. The populace that is on King Street, they're not happy with the state of the street, period. And that's not coming from the property owners. That's coming from the operators, the business operators. That's why we're doing this.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Sure. I think there's two separate issues. I will agree that folks I've talked to have all said the state of King Street is not what it used to be. There's all these additional improvements. I get it. I think we all agree.
We're all after the same goal, for sure.
How we get there, I think requires a little more massaging. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Councilmember Bowden.
I have kind of two questions here. The first one is, how did y'all arrive at this idea that the person that the mayor nominates and that we confirm resides in the district as opposed to owns a business in the district or operates a business in the district or even works in the district?
You weren't supposed to catch that was actually a typo that I carried over from the document when I made the PowerPoint. So it's actually not resides, because there's very few residential properties actually in the district. And of those that are residential, they're either second homes or rental properties. They're not owner occupied. So I apologize. That is actually an error. I've been corrected in my ear here. So it's not resides. It's related to the district, does business in the district. I don't know what the exact verbiage that the team is looking at there, but yeah, it's not, I apologize. It's not supposed to be resides.
Gotcha. I don't know if you guys had a college student in mind or something like that.
No, but that'd be an interesting take on that, actually.
And then with regard to the ambassador program, that, in addition to what Councilman Saccharin just raised, I think that's my biggest concern. Is there, so let's say we get 1 year down the road and we get, a million complaints of, only certain people are being allowed on King Street or something like that. Is there a way to revisit that?
Absolutely. And that's again, goes back to that transparency piece about why annually the city council will participate, hear what has happened in the last year. Those will be at council meetings. So they're open to the public participation during that process. And then as a part of the work plan, coming up with here are our thoughts on the activities for the coming year. So all of that is again a part of this. I think there are rightly some historical case studies on where programs in some cities, particularly Boston, New York, DC, where ambassador type programs have gone astray. I think there are also really good examples in more modern times, because a lot of those were older bids, older ways of doing business. But there's also a lot of case study or best practices, if you would, on how to do an ambassador program that really does do what the intention is, which is to create an opportunity for people to get directions if they need to provide information to folks who may, be experiencing homelessness. And this is a person that's recognizable, and they can ask, how do I get to this particular service or that service? these are not security. They are not police. They are just folks that are out there. They're extra eyes that can contact emergency services should a situation arise. They can contact code enforcement and our maintenance folks when there's a situation with a broken bluestone or graffiti or something like that. So they're an extra set of eyes that has training on how to contact and integrate with some city services to get a response out in a very timely fashion. They're not some of these private security type situations that you will have seen in some bids and what have you in other communities of the past.
Gotcha. I think y'all did a really good job sort of narrowly limiting their scope in this. So I appreciate that.
All right, anyone else? Councilman Waring.
Thank you. Let's go back, Mr. Summerfield. How much of the dollars are coming from the city, percentage-wise, from the city, and how much is coming from the private sector?
So based on the improvement plan, it's approximately 60% of the funds for the bid come from the assessment.
Right.
The remaining 40% come from other sources. Those other sources could include, and the CDA anticipates including, a direct allocation from the county and a direct allocation from the city, as well as some additional fundraising that they would do to kind of flush out that annual budget, either through programming that they do or what have you. Now, what has been made very clear all along in going through this is that they have to ask both the county and the city for those direct dollars that they may ask for annually over and above the assessment.
Thank you. I don't think we have any trouble with them asking for it. Can you go back to the makeup of the board? That's it. See number 2, where it says at least one director who represents a racial or ethnic minority. In 2022, that's tokenism. The patrons that come and visit King Street are of every hue and color. But we're going to design a board that we're going to have one. In 2022, we're going to have one. That's called tokenism. When it comes to representation on how the dollars are going to be spent, at 60% that you referred to, basically 70% is the people who pay into that. Well, let me put it like this: the taxpayers. Let's go like this. In the city of Charleston, that's not 70%. Let me correct myself. But we have one city. But the people in West Ashley, James Island, and certainly Johns Island, maybe even the King and Hoy Peninsula, going to be left out. That voice is going to be left out. And you say, well, some of the owners may live in those areas. I get you. But when it comes to that 60% of the dollars that's going to be coming from the public realm, we have private-public relationships already set up that work very well in this city. This one, kind of looks like, and let me tell you now, I voted for it, but I think there's some way to massage this to make it more inclusive of not just being, and I'm not just talking racial, people from different regions, West Ashley, James Island, Johns Island, McKee and Hoy Peninsula, Upper Peninsula, look and see things differently. And if you're going to get money from the public realm, you need to have a broad input. I mean, this piece about, I understand some of the ownership in particular on King Street is dissatisfied with King Street. But let me tell you, they bought into King Street looking a lot worse than it looks today, okay? The tenants that moved in there, that environment was what they see now, okay? A lot of this came out of the riot. I get that. You want King Street to look bad, I get that. I voted for the baskets and it was a great idea from Mike Bennett on behalf, put those flower baskets on the ornamental lighting, I voted to help paint the plywood boards up there that looked like after Hugo, frankly. Again, that was a great idea from Mike Bennett. We all supported that. But right now, this looks too
frankly, class. When I mean class, I mean caste, that's what I mean, caste. If you're not in that circle, you're not gonna be represented. And you're right, Councilman Saccharin, that's gonna be passed through to the tenant. Triple net lease, that's going right back to the tenant. I made mention when we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, I forget the name of the lady. She came up to the microphone. I don't know if her numbers are right, but a big number for this ambassador. I think this ambassador can run into a lot of conflicts. City has a great livability area, code enforcement officers, but if the private sector going to hire that person, I think they ought to pay that person. Not coming out of the 60 percentile that's coming out of the assessment. If the private sector is going to hire that person, they can be going up and down King Street to be the hall patrol of King Street. They need to pay them. And that's one way of keeping a check on that salary not becoming outlandish. Because I got to tell you, the private sector is not going to overpay. But with somebody else's money, that may occur. I don't see anything about that. And I know you're bringing this up for comment, but for so many decades, the peninsula was looked upon one way and the rest of Charleston was kind of left out. And that's all I see on this right now. I don't see at least one director who represents women. I mean, it's 2022. And we had knowledgeable minds that sat down and worked this out. That's not inclusive. It's just not. Now you brought it for the transparency, you brought it for the input. It's the time to have that input. So obviously some of those things need to come back. How would that have looked in 1950? A woman may have been on that, but there ain't a whole lot of difference than the way this thing would have been made up in 1950 and the way it's made up today. And I just think we're better than that. Back to that term, Peter, we're better than that as a city. So I'm thank you for bringing it forward, but I don't think we ought to rush it through like this. Thank you.
Would anyone like to speak before it comes back to Councilmember Shahid? Okay, Councilmember Shahid.
So just to build on what Councilman Waring and you were picking up why I asked those questions, but I think that we're going to short-sight ourselves. It's not just inclusiveness, it's diversity. And you want people with different ideas and different minds and different experiences on this board, because I'll just tell you quite frankly, I mean, some of the criticism I get from my constituents is I don't go downtown. I don't visit any of the places on King Street. And I get a plethora of reasons why they do that. So I think you go benefit if you get somebody from Councilmember Parker or Councilmember Boyd or Councilmember Mitchell's district to explain to you why I think you should be doing certain things that differently, because I think you want those folks back downtown. And so I get the idea what you're trying to accomplish with this board makeup. And not that we're being critical about it, I think we're just trying to make sure that you're going to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. And I think we're all, I don't want to speak for myself, but I want this to be successful. I want this to be a model for what we can do. Because I told y'all before, I want to take this this little incubator and bring it over to West Ashley. Because I think we can learn from this as well on some of the commercial parts, so we can do it in West Ashley. But if you don't have diversity and don't have inclusiveness on this board, then I think you're just going to be short-sighting yourself a little bit. So I think I know what y'all are trying to accomplish. And certainly it's going to be the folks who chunking in the money right from the property. But also I think that's why I asked the question: what's the size of the board going to be? And some these other questions. I think that's what we're all trying to pull in that same direction.
And let me comment on that too, Councilman. We've on purpose left the board open at this point. We had to get the bid to a point to say, yes, we can move forward with this initiative that's been really pushed forward for the last 40, 50 years in the city, and all the consultants want it. Y'all have heard all that. But the board is going to be totally revamped with these measures. We're open to more diversity. There is no question about it. I mean, I want that. I want somebody to challenge me. I mean, I'm James Island, but more diversity, absolutely. Not even a question. So I think as we progress with this, I mean, once we get this agreement done, the next step is we got to somehow figure out how to build this and implement it. I mean, these bids are done all over the United States and they're extremely, extremely successful. But again, it takes, you got to build it and put it together. And that's where we are at this point. So as far as the board, it is wide open. And the more diversity we can get, the better for all of us and for the community. I mean, this is what this whole bid is about, is to build this community, not just the people that visit Charleston, but the people that live in this community. And that's what this is all about. And that's why we're doing this. So, you know, more suggestions, the better for us as we move forward with all this initiative. Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Councilmember Seekings.
So just very briefly, I mean, this is all really great points. One of the things is we're sort of having this conversation a little bit in the dark because we haven't seen the MOU, which is sort of the setup for going forward. And boy, I'm the last person who ever wants to recommend something like this, but in some way, shape, or form, before this comes back to this body for a vote, I think it's very important that we have some form, hold your breath, of a workshop or something so we can have input after everyone has had a chance to look at what is a very long legal contract and document that is then going to be reviewed for performance against the document every single year by this council for something that the private sector has come to us and asked for and is going to run. So, you know, to say it's going to come back up in the June meeting, if that's the case, we as a group need to read it and we need to, I think, each give our input so it can get incorporated for the final document, because we're not going to build this thing up on June 21st at a city council meeting. It'll take us forever, literally forever. So I would highly recommend, let's get it distributed. Let's get it in people's hands, read it, get your input, and then y'all work together to do some form of a meeting that we can come and sit down in an open forum, build on it. So when it comes to us, you've got a pretty good idea of what's working and what isn't, what's going to fly and what isn't, rather than just, again, doing it behind sort of a tough spot we're in right now because we haven't actually seen it. We know the concept, we just don't know the details. And one thing I will give you input on, and this will not come as any surprise to you, Chris, or anyone, when it comes to boards, diversity is really great and less is better than more.
Yes.
Okay, so those are the two things I would tell you. How you sort of do that, by the way, is going to be a challenge, but you should have a board that is less people than are sitting around this table, I would humbly suggest to you. So.
Anyone else? And I would note this item is just for discussion only. We are not taking action. Yep. Councilmember Waring.
Mr. Price.
I feel like I'm on the firing line tonight.
No, I'm gonna help you out.
I did just fly in from Boston half an hour ago, so.
I'm gonna help you out with this. In 2022, how do you even come up with bullet points?
I'm sorry?
In 2022, how do you even come up with a bullet point? This second bullet point and the third bullet point? Don't answer the question. Just carry that sentiment back to the board. Okay?
Just say lawyers, Chris. Just say lawyers,
exactly.
legal document.
So the lawyers came up with bullet point 2 and 3.
It went through the lawyers. I believe it actually came from
Don't try
what
to
we saw in
no,
other
seriously,
agreements.
there's a question you don't need. I think you all will go back and do better. I have confidence. Thank you.
Councilmember Pell.
I promise I'll make this brief. While we're wordsmithing board makeup, I'm not so interested in someone who represents a racial, ethnic minority or a woman. I'm actually interested in someone from a racial, ethnic, and woman profile. In other words, this represents, I don't know what that means. I mean, I can imagine someone who can profess to represent a racial minority who is not a racial minority. So let's just make sure we're actually inclusive as opposed to sort of looking like we're inclusive. So without being tokenism, let's do it the right way. All right. Sounds.
All right. Would any other council members like to be heard on this item? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for your responses. All right. We are finally on to council committee reports. I am going to turn it over to Councilmember Gregory for the Committee on Human Resources.
Mayor Pro Tem, can we just take a stand break? This is grueling as hell. Excuse me, but can we just stand for a minute? Just a break, 5-minute break. I just need a stretch.
Is that a motion to have a recess?
Yes, please, something.
Is there a second? I'll grant a 3-minute recess if the council is conducive to that.
Thank you.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor Pro Tem, make sure to collect the fine from council.
Yeah. 7:42. All right, thank you for that suggestion, Councilmember Gregory. It did feel good for everyone, maybe not including myself, to stand up. But if you would like to proceed with the Committee on Human Resources report.
The Committee on Human Resources met Thursday the 12th for about 2.5 to 3 hours, seriously. And I thought it was time well spent. We did an update on the healthcare budget, but we did go into executive session to discuss some issues relating to contractual negotiations. No decisions were made during the executive session. And when we came out of executive session, there was no specific action taken on this item. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. What took most of the time, and which I thought it was really a very good job from our Human Resources Department, is their discussion on the preliminary results of the compensation survey and workforce update. I can't remember the name of the person from Human Affairs that did it. Ryan was unbelievable in terms of his presentation. And I'm not going to even attempt to try to summarize it because I really think it would be great at some point if that kind of presentation is made to the body of the whole, because we got into discussions with regard to comparisons of salaries with similar communities as ours, for sworn as well as non-sworn employees. We got into trends in terms of retention, in terms of vacancy rates, where those vacancy rates occur and potentially why they may be occurring. But again, I think the discussion is worthy of at least in a summary form of some sort, that be presented to the body of the whole. We took no action on any of these items. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Gregory. No questions? All right, great. We're going to move on to the Committee on Community Development, Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes, community development met on Thursday, May 19th at 3 p.m. And we had a couple of items there. The first, under new business, we had I-1, I-2, I-3, which was approved. And I would ask for approval on those three.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded for those three items. Is there any discussion on those three? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
And the rest of the items are IB, 5, and BI, which is 6. It was only for discussion. It had an electronic presentation. Came to the BAR, in which Sacram asked a lot of questions pertaining to that. There was a lot of discussion going on with that particular item. Councilman also mentioned that, and I mentioned it too, that during the time of the BAR, before they moved north of King Street, north of Line Street, because they wasn't there all the time. In council previous, when I was in council with my other colleagues, we was holding it back so it would not come over much what was going to happen. And that's when a lot of individuals, and even in African-American people, lost their home because they could not afford to repair their homes as such as the BAR statute was. And that caused the area to gentrify a lot, which Councilman Sacram had a couple of people that came to him for that same item. And also we had a presentation by Dr. Stevens, who talked about heirs property. And heirs property was another problem that caused us to gentrify also so many heirs. You can't find some of the heirs, and heirs didn't work along with the other brothers and sisters and other heirs, and caused that problem also to be gentrified, and lost a lot of homes during that time in the African American community. So there was a lot of discussion going on, a lot of information that we received during that time. And even Councilman Pell asked some questions also pertaining to the BAR and also with the heirs property also. So we're gonna just look at those things and probably might have to bring it back again. But right now, it was only for discussion and presentation. That concludes my report.
All right, thank you. Yes, Councilman Shade.
As to Mr. Mitchell, Councilmember Mitchell's question and discussion on heirs property, this is a suggestion. When I was the president of the Charleston County Bar Association, we did a clinic. We were addressing the Asheville and Maryville area in particular, making sure that residents executed a will. And we just took a bunch of attorneys, had a format for getting folks to come in. It was a two-part session. That would help to protect people's property rights. When they die, it has a smooth transition upon their death, and also to help at least start identifying the process of clearing up title to heirs property. So there's a mechanism, I'll just mention that to you, as a mechanism available local attorneys who we can consolidate and consult with to help address some of those issues. And it's a resource that we should take advantage of.
Yes, I remember that, and I was doing a lot of that even when I was working and working for HUD. I kind of worked with a lot of individuals for heirs property, but it's kind of hard sometimes dealing with them and trying to get them to do a will. It's not as easy as you think it is when it comes to a lot of people. So Dr. Stevens, she's the state director. She's the executive director, and she have handled a lot of the heirs property over the state. And she's doing a lot of that, bringing attorneys in. They have attorneys that work with that too. And I know they had some of the, on television, they were talking about attorneys who's assisting people with heirs property and doing free of charge. So, you know, if it's come back up again, I can kind of have you come down and kind of explain some things too.
Councilmember Gregory.
Yeah, just a couple of things. If we refer back to the Special Commission on Equity and Inclusion, there is an extensive piece under the affordable housing portion that deals specifically with heirs property. Some of what we just talked about is in there, but it's much more extensive in terms of the kinds of things that can be done and the kinds of things that the city can do to sort of move it along. And Mr., if you just bear with me for a minute, I think I was remiss in my report because we did, you're not finished, I'm sorry.
Just saying for the heirs property, Dr. Stevens, who was there, she is still working a lot, and the mayor spoke with her also because she was receiving funds from the city. I think it was only $10,000 out of $15,000 the last time. So he advised her to make sure that she brings back some information with how many people that was served from the city of Charleston, that when she submit for another grant for information that we'll know more and probably can try to assist them and more so she can reach more people in this tri-county, in this city of Charleston, so to speak, because you got Johnstown, Jamestown, different places in the city of Charleston. So those are the type of things we're working on also. Thank you.
And Councilmember Gregory, if you want to add something to your report, we can do it as soon as we conclude with this one because Councilmember Appel wanted to be recognized.
Sure.
And Saccharin. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Just to briefly comment on the heirs property piece, I asked that item be put on the agenda due to an article I read in the Post and Courier a couple months ago regarding Philadelphia and the work that city has done to address the heirs property issue over there. And of course, heirs property is a very complicated issue. It involves issues at the state level. It involves county property tax administration issues. We can't change any of those matters in the cheap seats that we occupy. But the city of Philadelphia established a fund, and they used that money to help facilitate title clearing functions, as Councilman Shea had talked about, because it's expensive to actually litigate these issues. Obviously, the best practice is to get somebody to put together a will and to avoid the problem entirely. But when the problem exists, fixing it can be very complicated. At that Community Development Committee meeting, we heard a lengthy presentation from our Community Development Department about all the great work that's being done to fund and leverage limited affordable housing resources. And one of the statistics that was shown to us was that it costs the city of Charleston about $60,000 to subsidize a single unit of affordable housing on the peninsula. If we could fund a title clearing action for an African-American family on the peninsula for $5,000, we can keep that property in the family and preserve generational wealth. You compare that $5,000 to $60,000 for one unit. It's not a question of either or, we need to be doing both, but that's a way we can further leverage limited funds and resources to having a better benefit and prevent the all too often scenario where heirs property situations turn into a scenario where folks lose their property for sometimes pennies on the dollar, and it gets developed and further gentrified and things of that nature. So I'm very glad we were able to have that discussion. The Center for Heirs Property attended the meeting, the executive director. They are a wonderful organization that knows exactly what they're doing. And she was asked during the meeting if her organization could use more funding. And as anybody who runs a nonprofit would be expected to answer, she said, of course. So that is something that we can look at. We just passed gave first reading this evening to 2 new MU rezonings. That's going to be further revenue streams. Most likely, if they pay the fee in lieu, we can dedicate a very small portion of that money to helping to underwrite some of these heirs property issues. So I would just encourage folks to follow us along over what we're doing in the CD committee. And if there's enough support amongst my colleagues for doing something like this, I think we can make it happen, follow in the city of Philadelphia's footsteps, and help some families stay in their homes on the peninsula and off the peninsula, maybe even into West Ashley and elsewhere. So just wanted to give a little bit more background on that. Thank y'all.
All right, Councilmember Saccharin, then Waring.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I'm at a place where I'm waiting for HARC to get established, and we're all trying to get that done. I hear the comments from folks in the community about where we are, but I will say our CD committee meeting this past week was solely focused on issues that were embedded in HARC. The 2 issues, one we just talked about, heirs property, and the second issue that I just want to touch upon and kind of articulate and to Mr. Mitchell talked about was the issue that we were discussing regarding BAR north of line has been something that I've talked about with constituents on the campaign trail, constituents for the past 2 years. And it really is just the ability for our BAR demo purview to be a little more flexible. I've heard from 8 family members, 4 of which were African-American. We'll call them legacy owners that had owned the home for years. Went to BAR for an improvement on a roof or a window, came back, it was too expensive, it was inflexible. They decided to move. They left off the peninsula. So here we are talking about redistricting, looking at our census numbers. My district in particular was 60-40 10 years ago, African-American. It's now 40-60. I am not suggesting that this policy by BAR was the single driving factor, because it's not. It's one of the factors of why we've had the displacement in the community in terms of the African-Americans and the peninsula. And that just doesn't affect the African-American community. Certainly, it's at some point, if you're middle class, you're not gonna be able to live downtown. The reason I'm bringing this up, and I think that the planning department has done a great job of making the tweaks. And I want to say thanks to Mr. Summerfield and Tori and Amanda Herring and Julia for all the work on this. I think we've made the tweaks. It doesn't need to come back to council. I'm going to let the policy work and see what happens. But the point was to make it a little bit more flexible, to give a menu of options for homeowners, and to essentially give them a more affordable option. I don't know if that's embedded in the new tweak. I've asked several times if we can use someone's income as a basis to make these decisions. I will say that, when I read the policy statement, we talk about equity lens, right? We've talked about that for the better part of 2 years. And I think, and I will just say this flat out, for those that are not in this work, when you hear equity lens, you really don't know what that means. I'm going to give you an example of what it means to me. When I read the policy statement from BAR, it is focused on buildings and architecture. There is not one mention of our population, of our citizenry. How do we have a policy that does not acknowledge the effects that we have on our community? And this is just not African Americans. This is just our citizenry. So when we're talking about equity lens, it's not just racial, it's equity for everybody in our community. White, black, Hispanic, yellow, it doesn't matter. So the reason I brought that up was I do think that there's a path forward for us to make the tweak to the policy. I'm not trying to abolish BAR. I've gotten many calls from constituents concerned that I'm trying to dismantle BAR, and that's not the case. I'm also certainly not trying to turn over properties to developers so they can flip. It's not for them. It's for our legacy homeowners, white and black, that are living in a home that can no longer afford to make the repairs that they need. So hopefully the policy will will bear fruit, and we'll see how it works. And if we need to bring it back to council for additional consideration, we will. But I just want to thank the planning department for making those changes. And that was why it was on the agenda. So thank you for those time, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilmember Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. These two gentlemen brought an enormous amount of information with their comments at community development. I mean, I was just flat out proud of them. Normally, they brought an aspect that as an African-American, we have to bring, but they got the wide perspective. Great suggestions, but normally what happens is great suggestions in the minutes at community development and it dies. There's been a number of times that Councilman Appel has brought great ideas from modifying our zoning ordinance, but there are no action steps. I actually tweeted or chatted or whatever with him afterwards. These examples of Councilman Saccharin says legacy. If I lived on the north side of town in this particular district that the BAR has now stretched, and I have rotted windows, some of the products that are available today in the way of insulated glass weren't available 50 years ago or 75 years ago. But the BR is going to come and tell you about a single pane option. I'm convinced if those people 50 years ago had the insulated glass that we have today, they'd come up, they'd have put some insulated glass in their homes. It would have been more energy efficient. Complying with energy efficiency, in some cases, goes against the grain of the BAR. But to the family that's paying a higher utility bill, they like to have that higher R factor. That's just a direct conflict. Discussion with Councilman Saccharin came up with that. I would like to plead on behalf of the council and these members that we get to an action step, okay? Get to the action step on vetting out our zoning ordinances. I mean, a couple of years ago now, I brought up the 75% rule and almost got crucified, frankly, behind it. And if you change the 75% rule, what that was for the new people on council, if the zoning board voted against you, we appoint the zoning commission. If they voted against a zoning issue, when it came to council, it took 10 out of 13 elected officials to overrule a committee that we appointed. Now that rule had been in place since the late 1930s. And to change that rule, I'm telling you, it took an act of Congress and a lot of money spent on my opponent by others trying to defeat me, to close that voice from being in this microphone. Well, it's changed. They said, oh, it's going to destroy the city of Charleston. I don't know, you can count them on your hands how many times we've overruled the planning commission. I have too many fingers since that rule has changed, but it made our city more inclusive. There are a ton of things like that on in our zoning commission, in our zoning ordinance, that's just financially discriminatory. If I want to get a change to a lot by, I think when you were on the board on the BZA, I needed a 2.5 inch. No, it was 16 inches to create another lot. 16-inch frontage difference. Now, if that board had voted against me, I would have to take City Hall to court. The city I love to court. Couldn't come back in front of any of the people that appointed those commission members that would have made that. But that is anti-small person, anti-low to moderate income, and it's getting to the point anti-middle income, but that's embedded in our ordinances. It just shouldn't be that way. There are a ton of things like that that raise the cost of doing business for Ms. Shaw Johnson and her team with affordable housing. That we have a piece now that if you have over 4 lots subdivision, you undergo the same requirements for approval for that subdivision that if somebody's building 200 houses. If somebody's building 200 houses, believe me, they got a lot of hoops to jump through. Again, you hear me talk about infill. for affordable housing. West Ashley, James Island, Johns Island in particular are great opportunities for that. But if you try to have a piece of property and subdivide 8 lots, you got to go through the engineering, the stormwater drainage, et cetera, that somebody's doing a 200. Those guys that came in here from Ken Hoy, that had, how many acres was it? 9,000 acres. You got to go through the same, almost the same process. It's just ridiculous. And we have the brain power around the table that can contribute with others, and of course our planning department that can make effective change. And I mean soon, not later, soon. So hopefully some of these good conversations won't end with being buried in the minutes. The action steps, hopefully we can come back at next council with a proposal for some of these action steps to be implemented. Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilmember Waring. So I'd like to just ask unanimous consent that we move so that Councilmember Gregory can add his addendum and we can continue to move if there's not an objection. All right, Councilmember Gregory, you had an addendum to your report. We already, yeah, items 1, 2, and 3 were already voted on, and then the rest were information.
Yeah, I mean, the more we talk, the more I see how important HARC has been, because a lot of what we're talking about are recommendations in HARC. What I wanted to do is to sort of clean up a bit on my report, because we did vote on a benefits administrator, and that was voted on unanimously. And that came out, correct. That was done with all of the committees. So that's something that the body as a whole needs to vote on. Okay, the recommendation for us to have a benefits coordinator. That's a motion.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on Councilmember Gregory's addendum to the HR committee report? Councilmember Waring?
No, not on the motion.
Okay. All right, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it.
There was one
Councilmember
other,
Waring?
thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. There was another aspect to the Human Resource Commission. That salary comparison that was done, the chairman was right. It was outstanding, great work, worthy of waiting on. But I, along with a couple other council members, had an opportunity to see some of the pay grid and comparisons that some of the firemen have put together. And I have to be frank about it. It wasn't a whole lot of difference. The overtime piece is an issue. I brought that up to Human Resources. And one of the pieces on that was to get our person that did the study, our CFO, together to vet out the differences between what the numbers that the firemen are showing and the differences between, I see Mr. Giroux nodding his head, and what because he's right, the nuances that are different, because it's just too much closeness there that we can actually get a workable solution. One thing, and I'm not alone in this, the fireman has been just exemplary in being gentlemanly, I should say, in bringing this issue forward. I mean, you see the signs in our neighborhood, support, it's in your neighborhood as well, support our firefighters. And everybody in this council wants to do that. That discussion, I don't know if they were online when that was being held. The mayor and all were there. It was a very heartily discussion, and the will to make meaningful changes there, and I think we'll get there. Thank you, Mr. But that was part of that Human Resources Committee meeting that should be shared amongst all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilmember Waring. I was there as well. It was very insightful. Moving to the Committee on Public Works and Utilities, Councilmember Waring, I know you are the chair, but since Councilmember Shea had chaired that meeting, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind if I go to him.
I don't think you saw this, but Councilor Parker had her hands up.
Oh, Councilwoman Parker.
It's okay, thank you. I know we circled back to human resources, so I just wanted to jump in. Again, great discussion. But like you were just saying, Councilmember Waring, I was curious, like you said, when it sits in committee, we've now seen the great survey. what's next? When do we decide out of that, what strategy we're going to implement as far as compensation for our workforce?
Councilmember Gregory.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question because you're correct. Sometimes things get lost in committee and never comes before the body of the whole. But the issues that we're dealing with, particularly as it relates to salaries for our firefighters, trust me, that will come out of committee and a recommendation will be made to the body of the whole. As for some of the other issues that may surround salary, et cetera, not necessarily for our firefighters, but in general, those are also budgetary issues that would be discussed during the ad hoc budget committee. That is not to say, however, that a recommendation couldn't come from human resources to the ad hoc budget committee. Just as we were talking yesterday about the salary issues with respect to recreation and the fact that we can't get people to do X, Y, Z. Again, that is something that can come out of committee, okay? Come to the body of the whole and have a discussion again in the ad hoc committee as we go forward with the 23 budget. So you're absolutely correct.
Perfect, thank you.
And I think that you need to keep saying that because I have some things stuck in committee right now that I'd like to get out of committee as well. Thank you for that question.
All right, thank you for that. All right, and as I just mentioned, Councilmember Waring, would you mind, since Councilmember Shahead?
Listen, I just want everybody to know about the talent we have in the vice chair on public works.
I had a pinch hit twice yesterday for Councilmember Appel on the annexation. Didn't take up your slack as well, but glad to do it. Glad to be on the bench. The Public Services Department committee met yesterday afternoon. We received a wonderful report from Matt Altop. I believe that everybody, I would suspect, has had some issues with debris pickup. It's been delayed, and God bless Matt and Tom O'Brien for their attention to all this. But Matt gave us an update on two systems. One is the current claw and scow pickup system, and we're transitioning to a knuckle and claw system. And as we go through this process, the savings on these would include savings on employment, personnel savings, on maintenance on these equipment, and on gas, and total out to about $500,000 savings as we transition from one type of claw and scow to the knuckle and claw. So it was a good report on that. We got also an update from Matt Fountain. I see Matt over there hiding. As to the small project allocation, we're moving along with that. As you know, we've allocated $1 million for the small project allocation. The money has been identified for 2021, 2022, all the way through 2024, essentially. That pretty much it. But we have several projects that are in progress that are sort of bleeding over from one year to another. And finally, he gave us I wouldn't say a Reader's Digest version of the spring fish burn update. And I'm not going to rehash all of that, but I think for the new members of council, some of the things that Matt said, it's just worth noting, and I'm going to probably mistake this, but upon completion of phase 4, a 500% increase in drainage water flow out, and after phase 5, 1,000% increase. And that's just an incredible project that almost a $200 million project overall, but moving that water out of our central spine on September Clark Parkway, such a critical part. One of the things that we overlook, and Matt brought this out yesterday, is the collateral benefit of all this was the beautification of that parkway that we have been able to accomplish. And so it's a story that's been told quite a few times. It was okay. It was good to hear it again. And Matt, thank you for that update on that. And finally, we had a approval of a permanent encroachment permit regarding the Ralph H. Johnson VA healthcare system. There was some discussion about this as they are proceeding with some improvements over that area. And we approved that unanimously, and I would ask that we adopt item L1 for this council's approval.
Second.
And that is my report on behalf of the chairman.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded for the adoption of that item. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? The ayes have it. All right, the committee on, Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So y'all, I just need to really, I know that everyone's probably feeling the pinch, like as we've just discussed. I mean, the trash service is certainly struggling right now. And I know that Matt Altop, Tom O'Brien, our environmental services crew, no doubt are working twice as hard. You know, I'm like a recorder when I say to all of my constituents, we are, you know, we have twice as much tonnage, we have equipment down, and we are understaffed. And this, again, this is why I go back to pay, because in a department, as we'll talk about next, you know, recreation, but specifically trash. If we cannot complete this government service for our citizens, I certainly think it's an issue. And I just feel like we don't talk enough in this. A lot of important stuff goes on in this room every night or every other Tuesday, but this is certainly a area that I think we need to have a little more discussion on. Like you said, I don't want to see it have to wait a whole nother year, another budget cycle. If there's improvements that can be made now, I'm asking y'all for what, you know, what could we do? What can we do for this department? Once again, I certainly think that if they're understaffed, underpaid, equipment's down, I just hope that there's support. And again, the presentation was for information only, and it's phenomenal, but it seems like it's going to take a little while to implement some of those strategies. And we are quite behind on this specific service. So I just kind of want to continue to talk about it. There's clearly a national crisis going on with hiring, but we need to start really as a municipality, just figure out how we are going to solve that problem, specifically for trash, because this should be a top priority item. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Saccharin.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilwoman Parker and I heard very similar plight yesterday in our Recreation Committee meeting. And I would just say, I agree with her 100%. The longer we wait, the dire the challenge is. So one of the things we talked about yesterday in the Recreation Committee was having a strategy, an HR strategy specifically focused on, I don't call them part-time, but our hourly workers, which includes our folks over in public service, folks in recreation. So I just want to echo those comments. I don't know what the path forward is. I'm not sure if that comes through HR, but we can't continue to wait. I mean, it's got to be addressed, and I'm not sure if there's something we can do financially. I'm not sure if it's just a staffing issue. I think a lot of folks say there's just not enough people applying, that it's not such an hourly rate issue. So if we bump up the hourly rates, is that going to help? I don't have the answers, but I do want to echo that we should address this and not wait till next year.
All right. Yes, Councilmember Shahid.
And the comments are dead on point. And if we can't do our basic services of picking up trash, and Councilwoman Shealy is going to give us a report on recreation, and we just can't do our basic services, then it's a reflection on our ability to provide for our citizens. And it's money. It's money. It's money. The equipment is being replaced gradually as these old equipment goes out of service and we bring in the new service. it's going to improve tremendously, and it's going to have a savings at the same time. But getting folks out there, and this is the number one problem, is employees. And I've given reports about turn 90, used to be called turning leaf, it's turn 90. Some of our best employees are those folks who come out of that program, former convicts. They were out there working, they work in the the Parks Department, they work in Public Works Department. And we can't turn those guys out fast enough to get them over here. But it is a huge issue. There's not a silver bullet solution to that, but we've got to be proactive on this. And the faster we address these issues, the better. I wish I had an answer to give everybody tonight, but we've got to stay ahead of the game on this thing. One of the things that we can do a whole lot better, and I've brought this up several times, we have a device on our phone. It's called an app, and we have a city app on there. And if we can just notify our citizens when there is going to be a delay, that alleviates a lot of the issues that we've been dealing with. That app is not up to date. I looked at the app today, this morning, and I noticed council member for District 1 still shows Marie DeChapo, Harry Griffin, and Carol Jackson. We're not using the technology that we have available to get the word out that we have an issue that we can't pick up the trash today. And in my constituents, most of it is frustration because they work on the weekends, they haul that stuff to the curb, and Wednesday it's still there, and they expect it to be picked up on Monday. And I don't blame them. I'll be a little pissed off about it as well. Sorry, my bad. I'll be upset about it as well. But if we just can communicate to the world, our constituents better, that helps us. But in the meantime, we've got to come up with an answer to address these things as well.
All right. Councilmember Shealy has been waiting patiently in the bullpen. So I'd like to call on him for the Committee on Recreation report, since it is germane to what everyone is talking about as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Recreation Committee met yesterday at 4 o'clock. We had 2 members of the Low Country Tennis Association give a presentation on our tennis centers. That Low Country Tennis Association's experiencing some growing pains. The good news is, I guess, that they've increased by 500 new tennis players and 50 more teams registered in 2022 in the Low Country Tennis Association. A lot of those included juniors. In 2012, the city had taken over the Maybank Tennis Center and 5 courts were added, but there was no lighting on those courts, and there's still no lights. And they were saying that lights would help alleviate some overcrowding that they're seeing in the tennis center over there. They came up with some approximate cost for lights on the courts, anywhere per court, $22,000 to $28,000. That doesn't include the wiring and labor. And they received a couple of bids. One of them about $283,000, one $219,000 for sports lighting. And they're asking if the city will please provide funding for installation of lights on the existing 5 clay courts there over at the Maybank Tennis Center. They also asked that we'll vote for the Park and Recreation Master Plan. And they're saying that they're not just looking for a handout, that they're also working to help with funding. They're hopeful they're going to receive the Facility Services Grant from the USTA. And they also have members who are willing to go out and get sponsorships and donations to help. Moving on to our aquatics update, and this is some of what some of our other council members were talking about. Just as in other areas around the country, they're having trouble finding employees, and particularly lifeguards. But they've recently closed the gap, and all 4 of our swimming pools will be open for Memorial Day. And we'll probably have to close for a couple of days after Memorial Day till some of these lifeguards are able to get out of school and go to work as lifeguards during the summer. So all pools will be open starting the week of June 6th. But there's not enough water safety instructors, so we will not have swim lessons this summer, unfortunately. So there's the new schedule for pools. You'll be able to see that on the website. If you know anybody that's 16 or older, that would like the lifeguard, please send them to the city recreation website or call the recreation department because we're still looking for lifeguards. We'd like to fill as many of those positions as possible. And we will pay for their certification. We will pay them while they're going through training, and we'll give them a $200 bonus. So a pretty good deal if you have kids that are 16 or older that might like the lifeguard. Jason Kronsberg gave us a recap on the master plan, and we're now starting the implementation phase. We'll be re-engaging with the consulting team, and we'll come up with several recommendations on how to fund these items. And we'll prioritize what we can do in the next 5 to 10 years, and then we'll look at the big list. And Lori and Jason will bring back a list of projects in about a month so we can determine a way to move those forward and how to fund it. So Lori also gave us a update on our enterprise manager position. It was narrowed down to 3 candidates, and we have now made an offer. We're waiting to hear back from that candidate. So hopefully we'll hear that soon. Jason gave us an update on Carr Richardson Park. We're looking at the end of July or maybe early August for that park to open. It's going to be an outstanding park, y'all. Jason and his team have done a great job on that. There's also a fraternity that's looking at ways to recognize people who have grown up in the historic Ashleyville and Maryville communities who've done great things in our community. And so looking forward to seeing some of that. Report on Fort Pemberton. There was a community meeting that was held in March. There was over 100 people that attended, and they gave great positive feedback. Of course, Fort Pemberton is going to be a passive park. It's about 6.5 acres. It's got a few parking spots. There'll be some historical interpretation, an open field, and very importantly, open water access, front water access there at that park as well. So we're also hoping to hear back on a $260,000 grant application. Hopefully we'll hear back from that in late July or early August, and hopefully we'll receive that grant. And Stonyfield is also progressing very nicely, and a lot of work being done there. So that concludes my report, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilmember Shealy. Does anyone have anything on that one? Councilmember Shayad, then Parker.
Yeah, just on the tennis center, I mentioned this, yes, I joined the meeting, and I've been in contact with Lori and Jason about upgrading the lighting, or replacing the lighting at the Charleston Tennis Center. And I just want to go back to that very first item we discussed today as the abandonment of that property on 8th and 3rd Street. If anybody has not yet been out to the Carl Richardson area, you need to go out there. And if we had abandoned and turned over that land a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, we would not be having that park. And so I just remind us that we made the right decision on that. And the Carl Richardson Park is a perfect example of how we hold on to access to water, because that little spit that goes out that runs perpendicular to parallel to Higgins Pier is just magnificent. And I'm glad we made the decision that we did. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So again, back to sort of just reiterating our sort of core services. I was really disappointed when I pulled up to my rec center on James Island and saw that there weren't going to be any swim lessons this summer. I certainly, trash collection, our environmental service workers, things like that are a much higher priority. But I also think in a city surrounded by water, these resources, these city services, residents, really rely on this. Small children, these are affordable places to take swim lessons. Not everybody can go to the private, organizations and do it. So I think Mrs. Lori said something, I know on James Island, we have families wait 4 hours in line to get into these swim lessons. So it's just another item that I really, really want to see our city prioritize for our citizens, our families. I think they're really important. My family, we support our recreation center. We're there all the time. We do what we can, but obviously they are, their hands are tied with what they have. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Listen, I don't think we ought to accept the decision that we don't have swim lessons or anything like that this summer. That's why those issues supposed to come before this body. including of the mayor, I don't believe that North Charleston's not having a program. I don't believe Mount Pleasant is not having a program. I don't believe the City of Columbia is not having a program. Now, maybe based on the task in front of our staff right now, they may need some help to get that done. And this is the place to get it. So I think we need to, in the interim, in the next 2 weeks before now and the next council member, get with our Ms. Yarber and her team to find out what's needed to do that. If it's more money to get it done, we're gonna find a way to get it done. But when kids don't get swim lessons, that leads to, quite frankly, death in some cases. Every summer, some child, we all know the story. The quality of life, anything that hurts the family or quality of life during the summertime, we should be able to fix that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And one other thing I want to add to the program. The Carl Richardson Park. Thank you so much on staff and council. So again, people new to council, we voted eminent domain. Eminent domain to get that property and keep it in the public realm. Please accept the invitation to go over and look. It gives the best view of the replica of the adventure at Charlestown Landing than for any public view that I know of, okay? And I would like to have added to Recreation, Councilmember Mitchell, the WPAL park. We have 1.5 million that's been parked for renovations. That would be the first public park in the city of Charleston, at least from the West Ashley side, to the Stono River. Stono River is a long river. City went out of its way during the Raleigh administration to buy that property with tourism dollars. During the Mayor Tecklenburg, we set aside 1 million. The next year we came and set aside another 500,000. We did not, we protected those monies during COVID. Now, as we approach our budget cycle coming up for 23, things have improved. We definitely should appropriate enough money to complete the WPAL park. It's a wonderful asset, again. So Councilmember Appel, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, you all share that. And the people in District 7 would like to enjoy that park.
That's right. All right, thank you, Councilmember. There is nothing else further. We have the Committee on Ways and Means coming up next. It has been moved and properly seconded to accept the Committee on Ways and Means report. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. We now have bills up
1
for
through
second
5.
reading.
1 through 5, I move for approval.
Second.
Item
1 through 4.
1
Yes.
through 4.
Yes, thank you. It is 1 through 4, so we will take items 1 through 4. It has been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion on bills up for second reading? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Now, in this fun little tidbit, this
Second.
is the actual language. Shall these bills pass, the title thereof be changed to an ordinance and be ordered engrossed for ratification? 1 through 4. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second. This is just for everybody's edification. It is in the municipal code. All right. It has been moved and properly seconded to do third reading for bills 1 through 4. Is there any discussion for third reading and ratification? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any
Aye.
The ayes have it. We now have bills up for first reading. Yes, Councilmember Pell.
I just need to note for the record, I have to recuse from M1. Thank you.
All right, please note that Councilmember Pell has recused himself from.
Approval 1 through 3.
Second.
All right. It has been moved and properly seconded to adopt items 1 through 3. Is there any discussion while I sit here and sign these? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. If you will give me just a few seconds. Yep, we need to stay in session for a few more minutes while I sign these. I'm sorry. Oh, Mayor Tecklenburg.
I may have missed it, what council just said, but Mayor Pro Tem, I was going to commend you on doing such a fine job in leading the meeting tonight. Congratulations and thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Okay, we should note that the next regular meeting of City Council will be our June meeting, which will be June 21st.
Third Tuesday.
And that will be in a few weeks. So, all right.
Move for adjournment.
Now, I will entertain my favorite motion.
Move
Should
for
anyone like to
adjournment.
make it. The motion to adjourn by Councilmember Mitchell. Is there a second? Second. All right, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn. See you guys next time by acclamation. Have a good night. Drive home safe.